lots of things. It's been so much.
We're live. Yeah.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this November 16th meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission. My name is Charlie Parrish. I'm the chairman of the commission. Hope to be joined in a few minutes by our vice chairman, Mr. Harry Lassane, who's on transit here now. But the commission members with me today are Mr. Jimmy Bailey, Ms. Donna Jacobs, Ms. Sunday Lampasas, Ms. Peter Bryant Jenkins, and McKenna Joyce. And I think that Ms. Harrison will be here too. I think she was upstairs, so hopefully she'll be in a few minutes. The commission members are appointed by Charleston City Council. They're volunteers, and you join me in thanking them for their work. The procedure we'll use today is I'll ask staff to introduce an item on the agenda. They'll present it, then they'll give a recommendation. Then we'll ask the applicant to speak. And after the applicant speaks, we'll ask anyone in favor of the application to speak. And then anyone opposed to the application has a chance to speak. And then we'll give the applicant to respond to any concerns that were brought up. After that, we close the public aspect of it, and the planning commission members will debate it, talk about it, discuss it, then vote on it. I'd ask you if you have a phone today to please put it on silent or shut it off. And if you get up to speak today, please come up to the podium and the microphone, tell us who you are, if you represent someone, and where you live. That would be helpful for the minutes. Mr. Christopher Morgan is here with us from the planning staff. Would you introduce anybody from your staff that will be presenting today, and also any changes to the agenda?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Christopher Morgan. I'm planning manager here at the City of Charleston. First off, apologies for the dim look in this room. It's not normally this dim, but we're having some electrical issues. It's actually better than it was this morning, but our little dome light is not working for some reason. But anyway, the agenda, as published, had a couple of deferrals, and one of these was at 328 Maybank, amendment to a plan, master plan. And then we also had a deferral of 326 Cessna Avenue in West Ashley, the annexation there, and zoning for that property, but everything else is on the agenda as per normal. Staff here with us tonight, Jim Hemphill, who's our primary planner working with the Planning Commission, also Philip Overcash, our senior planner, Molly Connor, our annexation planner, is here, Lee Batchelder, our zoning administrator, and then Philip Clapper, our clerk, is here. That is the city staff that you want to come see.
We appreciate y'all's work. The staff does a great job with the city of Charleston. We appreciate the work. If it's okay with the commission members, I'll take the minutes at the end after the go through the agenda items, if that's okay. First item on the agenda is rezonings. Number one, property on Southwood Drive, Fennel Hills, Johns Island, TMS number 279 000018, approximately 60.61 acres. Request rezoning from single family SR1 to conservation C, approximately 22.35 acres, and diverse residential DR6, approximately 38.26 acres. And Mr. Morgan, correct, well, we heard this last time, we deferred it, and I think this is a change to the application, correct? So if you can go through that, we appreciate it.
Sure. So yes, so the 60-acre tract here off of Maybank Highway on Johns Island. The applicants had originally requested that the entire tract go to diverse residential DR6. Now that they have modified their application to include the DR6, but a good bit of what we call conservation zoning. So about 22 acres or so of conservation zoning. It's identified in the area shown in green on this image here. And you'll see some other images in a little bit that show that the actual areas that we're going to have very limited or no development are even wider than those conservation areas as shown, buffers that are required around the conservation areas too, but we'll get into that in just a minute. So to orient you all, we did point this out last time, but Maybank Highway is about 1,000 feet or so to the south here. This is Southwood Drive that wraps around the property. The development team that is working on this is already doing phase one of their development. I believe it's called the Hamlets, that will be going on these properties that are zoned DR6. And they were seeking to continue the type of development they have on that development, connect it and get onto this property here with connections over to Southwick. This is an aerial image of the property. It gives you a sense of, the lots, the front on Maybank Highway down to the southeast, and then the single family lots that are on the Fenwick Hills area over here to the north and northwest. In our city plan, which is what we use to come up with our recommendations for these rezonings, the site shows as suburban and natural or wetland. And, the extent of the wetlands on these images are somewhat hybridized. We did not have the exact boundaries or configuration of wetlands here, but the idea was that this was a tract that definitely had some wet areas as well as some high areas. And so that led to some of the requests from the applicants to have the conservation of portions of the site that were wet and were not going to be developed. The city plan land use recommendation is for the suburban category, which is a 4 to 8 dwelling units an acre. So the the DR6 fits within that. And then for the natural wetland, the conservation would be a category that would fit well with that recommendation from the city plan. So, just so everybody sees, in SR1, you've got single family dwellings at 4.8 units an acre. In the DR6, you also have diverse residential up to 6 units an acre. Something to point out is in single family residential, you can also have what's called a conservation subdivision, which would let you do more than just single family. It would let you cluster the lots. It would let you have townhouses if you have about 20% of those as affordable townhouses. So that is an option that could have been pursued by a developer here. That is not what the applicants are seeking to do. But just so everybody understands that you actually could get higher than 4.8 units an acre, even under existing single family, if somebody pursued a conservation development here. This is a site along Maybank that part of the reason the plan recommends for the level of density that it does is that Maybank in general is some of the highest land in the city, and definitely highest land on Johns Island in the city. What you see in this image here is that the bulk of this site is at 19 to 25 feet in elevation. Yes, there are some wetlands there, but they are not as low wetlands as you see in critical areas, typically along the edges of our marshes and things like that. So that is one of the reasons that the comprehensive plan does have allowances for density on this site. I also wanted to point out how I know that traffic concerns are a big part of concerns of surrounding residents, and Southwick is definitely a street that connects to a lot of different developments and is a very important connection to Maybank Highway here in this location, if you can see my cursor moving there. But the idea that we've been working on for really 15 years is to ultimately get Southwick realigned with St. John's Woods Parkway, which is here, which would help us meet the justifications for a traffic signal. And that has been held up by funding issues, not having the funding to do it, and also the development potential of these tracks here as to whether those would end up developing in a way that would help fund this intersection alteration here. It is something we still are very interested in pursuing. It's shown in our Johns Island plan. We think it's the ultimate fix for Southwick and its connectivity to Maybank issues. It's not going to reduce traffic on Southwick, but it would help folks that are on Southwick get out to Maybank in a safer fashion. So just wanted everybody to be able to see that image, and happy to answer further questions about that. We have some images of the site. This is looking along the northern edge to the east, existing single-family houses across the street here. This is the buffer area that would ultimately be preserved. The developers have proposed a 25-foot undisturbed buffer area through here. And this is looking southward from Southwick. This is houses that actually back up to Southwick Drive and have their backyards on it. There's a fence line here. Then over here, you see more of where the buffer area would be, so preserved trees, things like that. And you see the nature of Southwick Drive itself. And then this on Southwick looking to the north up towards the big curve in the road here. And again, you get a sense of where this buffer area would be along Southwick. And most of this area you see in this image would be preserved area, conservation zoning, and the development plans that we're going to discuss tonight. So the applicant has provided some slides. I'm going to just zip through these, but the applicant back to them when they start their presentation. But of course, request under the current SR1 is 4.8 units an acre. Under conventional SR1, you can do conservation, which does allow greater density than 4.8. And then under the proposed, the DR6 would be 6 units per acre, or about 160 units on the site. This is a little bit more of a blow up of the site that shows where they would have residential development in these areas in this kind of amber or orange color here. They would have a connection to Southwick Drive, which is required by city codes. And they would also connect to their existing development that is already approved, the Hamlets on Maybank. That's their phase 1. And then they would have the wetlands here that they would not be building on. There are other uplands here that they are not proposing to build on, and we can get to that in just a second. This is the area that would be for conservation. So you see how the conservation would cover the wetlands in here, and then the conservation requires a 25-foot buffer between it and any developed areas. So these buffers here were not included in the conservation district calculations, but they would also be areas that could not be built in by virtue of the buffer requirement against the existing or the proposed new development. And this area would be conservation along with a substantial 50-foot buffer, and then development here south of Southwick, and then more conservation area in here. So again, a very large percentage of the site as preserved conservation area that has very limited development potential. And then this is a kind of connectivity image that the applicants provided. Again, their connections from the Hamlets into the site, and then the connection that is required by the city up to Southwick Drive. Their overall development scenario, and I'll let the applicants talk about this, what they're proposing to do in some of these wetland areas, such as trails and amenities that could be available to surrounding neighbors, things like that. So from a staff standpoint, based on our comprehensive plan recommending 4 to 8 units an acre in this area, we are recommending approval. We were doing that the last time when it was just the DR6. We're even more in favor of it now because a good portion of it is going to the conservation district, and we feel comfortable with what it is and recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Is the applicant with us?
Yes, sir.
Like to talk to us a little bit?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission, and good evening to all who came out to hear about this proposed project. My name is George Elias with Middleburg Communities. Middleburg is a fully integrated development, construction, and property management firm that focuses on the southeastern United States. Our regional office is right down the street here on East Bay Street here in Charleston. This zoning was deferred by Planning Commission a month ago to give us an opportunity to meet with the neighbors. So last week we held a voluntary neighborhood meeting at the Berkeley Electric to share more about our detailed plans with the public and take questions and feedback. Middleburg prides itself in transparency and integrity, so we truly appreciate all the valuable dialogue. We are here tonight to publicly address the key topics from that neighborhood meeting and from the Planning Commission pre-meeting comments online. We will also address the formal opposition letter from Mr. Fulmer and the Fenwick Woods HOA that was written and signed prior to the neighborhood meeting that unfortunately does not have all of the facts. The parcel on Southwick Drive is approximately 61 acres with over 33 acres of wetlands and 26.75 developable acres. The current SR1 zoning allows 4.8 units per acre, which by right today allows 128 single-family homes. Our application is requesting DR6 zoning that would allow 6 units per acre, which would equal up to 160 units. As Christopher mentioned, the 6 units per acre requested density fits squarely within the city's comprehensive plan for this location of 4 to 8 units per acre. We believe that the Planning Commission had great foresight when they created the comprehensive plan, identifying this site and this specific location for this type of development. We believe that our zoning request corresponds with that comprehensive plan. Middleburg is in a unique position to develop this parcel as we were approved, as Christopher mentioned, in April of last year for the Hamlet Maybank project. We often hear cities say that they want to promote more continuity, coordinated development versus a shotgun approach. This opportunity is exactly that. With both parcels and consistent zoning classification, we can provide the best possible product and seamless connectivity and consistency. Although the site is 27 acres of developable acreage, as Christopher mentioned, we are only planning to develop on 16.7 of those acres. The DR6 zoning is crucial in allowing us to concentrate our development on that amber area in the middle to minimize our footprint and our wetland impacts. We believe that this is unique to Middleburg in our proposed plan, and that any other developer without the adjacent parcel would present a plan that looks very different from the one you're looking at today, with more acreage used. Our current site plan is only proposing a very small wetland impact of less than half an acre to provide connectivity through the site at that pinch point in the amber area. We have also gone above and beyond since last meeting and amended our application with the voluntary conservation and avoidance and minimization of wetlands impacts. So neither us nor a developer in the future will be able to impact these wetlands without a rezoning. A single family builder today with the current SR1 zoning could fill in the wetlands. All that being said, I repeat that we are not impacting more than half an acre of wetlands. Related to conservation, the Fenwick Woods HOA opposition letter stated some inaccurate information about wildlife habitats on the site. We have engaged a professional consultant engineer to perform an extensive and thorough threat and endangered species due diligence on the site, where they utilized the South Carolina Heritage Trust Program and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Endangered Species Database. They physically went to the site, walked it, and observed it, and did not identify any occurrences or suitable habitats for threatened or endangered species. In all of our communities, we maintain public and private outdoor spaces, including preserving grand trees, vegetation, protected wetlands, and wildlife habitats should they exist. Flooding and drainage are important topics on Johns Island and throughout Charleston. We understand and agree with the principles of Dutch dialogues. First off, to reiterate what Christopher mentioned, this is very high ground. Even so, this parcel is in a SPA, a special protection area, so the requirements are very stringent and meticulously reviewed by the city when it comes to stormwater management. This includes increased stormwater retention, sizing of buffers, and also includes a mandated 25% peak reduction flow from the existing level. This helps us to make up for the existing Fenwick Hills area, which had no stormwater retention, making it prone to ponding. We know these requirements very well, having designed the adjacent property to these standards. Also, a concentrated townhome product has a smaller footprint and less impervious roads than a single-family community, resulting in a smaller stormwater impact. As you know, many of the flooding impacts on the island are due to old, poorly designed, and unmaintained infrastructure, not the impact of new development. We can assure you that our new development is only improving the situation that will not have upstream or downstream impacts. Our interests are aligned with yours. The last thing that we want is for our residents or our management staff to have to deal with flooding. As a reminder, we're impacting less than a half acre of wetlands and leaving 10 plus acres of developable acreage without units, leaving over 43 total acres of this site unimpacted. As you can see from the site plan, we are even leaving some of that developable acres for a large bioswale for additional drainage. We believe that this is a unique feature and something that any other developer would not be able to provide, as they squeeze that area with inefficient roads and large homes. Our civil engineer, Barry Whalen from HLA, a longtime and local Charleston resident, is here with us tonight if you'd like to ask any specific question later about the stormwater. He's an expert, especially living here. Another utility benefit to the surrounding neighborhood is power and sewer infrastructure. I learned from the neighbors at the neighborhood meeting that some families experience power outages from just a windy night due to some of the old overhead power lines. With our new development, we can add redundancy to the power grid and loop our power and increase that current infrastructure to try to prevent some of those outages. I also learned that many of the homes in the Wicks are on septic without permanent sewer. Our new development would provide the sewer infrastructure on Southwood Drive for those homes to contemplate tying into in the future. We understand that traffic is a major concern for Johns Island. For this site, I think it's important that we focus on the existing by right use that could be built tomorrow versus our proposed use, SR1 versus ER6. 128 large single-family homes with 4 or 5 bedrooms will undoubtedly house large families with kids, 2, 3, maybe even 4 cars per household. All the parents here know about chauffeuring their kids around to school, to their friends' houses, to activities. That amounts to way more daily trips than the residents of a rental community with 85% 1 and 2 bedroom units. Our renter profile is a young professional or an empty nester, a nester with less cars per unit and less daily trips taken. The International Institute of Transportation Engineers publishes trip generation data statistics, and they show that townhomes generate 65% less trips than do single-family residents. A formal traffic impact analysis is not part of the rezoning process, but because of all the feedback on traffic, we did go ahead and perform a generations calculation using the ITE data, and it proved that our existing use, even with the increased unit count, produces less trips than the existing zoning, even with the increased units across the board. We understand that Southwick and Maybank intersection is less than ideal. Our ownership of the adjacent property will allow residents to access Maybank Highway through the proposed connection and future street network, helping to mitigate the impacts on Southwood Drive. Can you show the one slide, Christopher? Thank you. If the intersection is so problematic and backed up, our residents will choose to use our other entrance to access Maybank Highway. I think it's important to point out that any other developer that were to develop this would be forced to send all of their traffic onto Southwood Drive and to that intersection. Connectivity of the road network is an important tool for alleviating traffic, something Mr. Zlogar of the Johns Island Task Force preaches in his middle ground approach to improving traffic safety. As such, we have reserved land for a future east-west connection, including the space for a traffic circle if that's something the city would want to pursue in the future. We've also reserved land for a future north connection. These are not proposed in our current plan, but we believe that the ability to reserve these areas is a great benefit for future flexibility in the street network. Although not directly involved, and as Christopher mentioned earlier, we do know plans and discussions to realign the Southwick and Maybank intersection with a traffic signal or circle. In addition to the road improvements that we will include on our project based on the findings of the TIA, the fees from our Hamlet project, on top of the fees for this project, will contribute millions of dollars over a multi-year period that goes directly towards funding those road improvements on Johns Island. Without new development, there will not be the resources to make those improvements that Christopher shared. We sympathize with you when it comes to speeding and certainly support the safety of the community. From what I've heard, much of the speeding is from non-residents using Southwick Drive as a cut-through, not your fellow neighbors themselves coming or going from their homes. Similarly, we do not believe that our residents entering or leaving the property will greatly contribute to the speeding population, as it seems that much of the problem is attributed to the cut-throughs. That being said, regardless of our impacts, we would like to improve the situation. We want to put an end to Southwick Speedway. We have spoken directly with the South Carolina Department of Transportation about these issues, as Southwick is a state-owned road. They did do analysis on this road in 2016, and the 85th percentile of their observed drivers were at 42 miles an hour. And in the 3-year period prior to their study, there was only 1 accident reported. So at the time, no adjustments were recommended to Southwick Drive. Unfortunately, other traffic calming measures such as speed humps cannot be installed on roads over 25 miles an hour, and this is a 35 mile an hour road. So as such, we strongly support the 35 mile an hour speed limit on Southwick Drive. So we are in discussions with the city and DOT about funding the installation of reflective pavement markings and speed limit signs with built-in radar detection, which are both proven to be very effective. At Middleburg, our communities are devised with traditional neighborhood design concepts to enhance the resident experience, but equally important, benefit the surrounding community. We focus on walkable communities with connectivity and streetscapes that foster a strong community feel. As such, Christopher, can you go to the site plan, please? Our plan features some new things that we're showing here. We did not show the site plan at the last meeting, but we did share it at the neighborhood meeting. We have some features such as a walking path all the way along Southwick Drive, full interconnectivity of all of our sidewalks, a passive park with walking trails, and even a nature observation boardwalk through the undisturbed wetlands with benches and observation lookouts, all of which would be available and open to the public. Despite DR6 allowing increased maximum height, our townhome units do not exceed 2 stories. We know how important it is that our project fits in with the surrounding community. As the developer of the Hamlet project next door, our designs and elevations have already been vetted and approved by the Charleston Design Review Board. Despite our beautiful exterior, we have voluntarily increased the buffer on Southwick Drive by 2.5 times and set back the units 25 feet from the property line and proposed dense landscaping and trees to shield the views of units from Southwick Drive. In direct contrast to individual homeowners that can vary dramatically in terms of the upkeep of their home, Middleburg fully owns and manages the entire property, all units long-term. This means professional management, maintenance, upkeep of the units, landscaping, the entire property. Ms. Giddens, who I'm sure will speak shortly, brought up some very valid concerns regarding pond upkeep. She is a scientist and informed us of how unmanaged stormwater ponds can negatively affect the environment. Unlike a single-family community that is difficult to coordinate and pay for these services via the HOA, Middleburg, as the single owner of the entire property, contracts with a stormwater management specialist at each of our communities who is on site monthly for testing and cleaning to maintain these eco-sensitive elements. As the sole owner of all units, we are able to aggregate services such as these to do a great job of maintaining our properties. Home builders have no long-term investment in the community. They build their homes, sell them off, and then they're out of the deal, leaving any issues for the individual owners to manage. We are invested in the long term. Our interests align with yours. Just as much as you, we don't want to have to deal with any of the issues that have been raised. We know firsthand that developers get a bad reputation, and we do apologize for any situations that have occurred in the past. But we are working on the project right next door. Please use that as an example. We have done the things that we said we're going to do. We're a local developer that's invested in the prosperity of Charleston. We won the Charleston Department Association's Diamond Award for Community of the Year in 2018, and we're long-term community partners. We support the missing middle. We believe in providing a diversity of housing options to make housing more attainable across the board. We are seeing the increasing trend of rent by choice, not by necessity. We see sophisticated renters that are young professionals or empty nesters that aren't ready to buy a home yet, or just don't want to deal with a mortgage or the troubles associated with home ownership. We provide that more attainable, simplified lifestyle. Our residents are valuable, active, and caring members of the local community. We all know that home prices and interest rates are rising, so availability of rental housing is even more critical. It's very easy to stand up and oppose new housing when you already have a place to live. We want you or your mother or your father to be able to downsize with no strings attached. We want your son or daughter to be able to afford to live where they grew up when they come back from college. We want Johns Island to flourish and continue to be a great place to live. Thank you.
Can you clarify one thing for me? So it's 27, it could be developed, you're developing 16.7. How many units do you perceive? I'm sorry, I probably missed it.
160?
160, great, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Any other questions, the applicant, commission members? Thank you, sir, appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Anyone else like to speak in favor of this application? One like to speak in opposition? Okay, if y'all would raise your hands so I get kind of an idea how many people will speak. Great, okay. I appreciate it. It's not that many, so that's great. But if you would please, if someone makes a point, I'd ask you not to reiterate it or give us new points. But I ask you to hopefully comments just a couple of minutes apiece. Whoever's first, go ahead. Thank you. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you live. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hannah Giddens. I live on Southwood Drive. I'm a property and my primary residence is there at 1774 Southwood Drive. I'd first like to thank the applicants for the neighborhood meeting last week that they held. But I would like to state that I am opposed to rezoning from single family to higher density, and for the following reasons. some of which I said 4 weeks ago standing here. Rezoning to higher density in the middle of single-family homes is out of character and sets a precedent that should not be set in the middle of single-family homes. While we are a suburban edge, we are a neighborhood on Southwick and in Fenwick Hills. Upzoning shows a complete disregard for the lack of infrastructure. Just to reiterate, as you said, for 15 years, we've been working on that intersection. It's likely the development and people will be moved in and that intersection will be unchanged. So that is a strong concern. Also, the cut through that they're talking about, most people turn and head towards James Island. They're not going to Wadmalaw and Keel and turning right. So it's while their residents might use their drive, it's unlikely to alleviate any of the individuals using that road as a cut through as suggested at the meeting 4 weeks ago. I would like to readdress the wetlands. As we've all heard, approximately 40 of these acres are wetlands. The applicant's plans show large areas of continuous impervious surfaces. While they do say that the townhomes are reduced impervious surfaces as compared to a whole bunch of single family homes, and looking at some of the slides, you can see those long driveways with nowhere for the water to exit, but those retention ponds. Increasing density decreases the ability for the land to handle water, with a decrease in evapotranspiration due to reduction in trees and loss of trees and a decrease in infiltration of that water into the ground. I'm no longer a scientist, I'm an educator. That was another life. But if the city of Charleston is so dedicated to the mitigation of flooding, I'm still unclear as why we are even considering allowing higher density into an area that would disrupt drainage and adjacent to wetlands and to an SPA. To address the conservation easement, I understand the sentiment, but what safeguards would be put in place to make sure that the conservation easement remains as such? I am familiar with the fact that conservation easements get traded and developed on in a lot of cases around here, especially after speaking with friends at OCRM today. I would like to address a comment the applicant made to me at a neighborhood meeting. I was told twice that this was an eco-friendly development. If Middleburg is transparent, I do want assurance of that. And it sounds like they are very transparent. So I want to double down on what eco-friendly is. How about paving with partially pervious materials? Why are we putting a bunch of pavement in wetlands that we know actually hold water? If you go back there, there's water. I can go back there right now. There's streams everywhere. It's not just wetlands with a puddle. There's streams back there. So how about landscaping with only native plants? If Middleburg Communities maintains all the property, then they should also maintain all of the landscaping. Right? How about endorsing no pesticides or fertilizers, all of which are going to end up in those 4 to 5 retention ponds that are required because of how much the land will be altered on that property. And furthermore, I know that they have monthly testing done by their water quality management team, but if they are transparent, I would like to suggest that citizen scientists called the Charleston Scientists and or DHEC would be able to also monitor not only their ponds, but the surrounding wetlands, because they do provide important ecosystem services to all of the wetlands in that entire parcel. Lastly, I would like to guarantee that the uplands are not reserved for building in the future. And my very final opposition is that upzoning opens Pandora's box. So say they don't retain this property, what's to say that somebody won't come in the future and go even bigger? So,
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm opposed.
Thank you. This isn't a rally. I know I appreciate y'all's support, but we appreciate you not doing that. Thank you. Next. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Karen Buckley. I live at 1578 Southwood Drive. I'm a registered voter.
We're sorry about the lights, too.
That's okay. Highlighting me. I thankful that was such a great presentation. I also was at the neighborhood meeting, and we did get a lot of. I was on the news being interviewed about this. There was a lot of avoidance, and the new slide that you guys were seeing from the developer has some changes from what was presented actually at our meeting. I just asked straight out, why not do single family residence? Why do we have to have so much development? It was avoided, and I was told that if they don't get their approval, that they will build on each and every inch of buildable space. And it's kind of in a different tone, but I understand it. The fact is, everything looks great on paper. And it was Wednesday before the storm. I asked him if he's ever walked the property. He said, no. I said, well, here's your chance to actually see in living color of the, what happens during storms. There's just no reality versus paper. I did prepare a couple of packets of actual photos on the drainage system. It just isn't working currently. And, adding buffers and things like that, there's still all that hardscape that's going in that's going to push water into our backyards. Actually, most of this is in everybody's front yard because it doesn't drain. We have toilets that can't be flushed if it's on the first floor. I mean, this is just everyday regular life for the residents in the immediate area. The second thing, yes, it is speed. For anybody passing through, it is not common sense to take the people who are living in the furthest corner to push them out to Bay to then go off island. That's not common sense at all. I mean, you're not going to go south to go north. Anyways, that's my opinion. The other half of my package is all of the ditch diving. All the vehicles are in the ditch. Almost on cue, we had an accident just last Saturday. Split a telephone pole, didn't make the curve. Power grid was taken down for 4 hours so that they could at least get a temporary fix. The car was completely rolled over. The alleged drunk drivers were completely gone. It did affect the whole neighborhood. I mean, since I've lived there in 2019, this is an accident. We've had 8 ditch divers, 3 near misses, and that just means somebody was able to pull out of it. But you can see when it goes across your driveway, you have skid marks. It's just asking for more, almost over 300 vehicles to be added to the 3,000 vehicles a day that do travel that road now. Study was done by the local police. And I just think it's far too much. There just has to be something else needs to be done.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
it. Thank you for coming. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. My name is Bruce Hoke. I live in 1617 Southwick. And looking at the back of townhouses, I'm not crazy. I don't think anybody here would like to come out the front door and suddenly see the back of townhouses, but that's a whole other subject. Could I give you some pictures of flooding at the
If you want to handle this, Mr. Bailey down here, I think you can pass it
Because
around.
I'm going to talk about
Thank you.
this is the corner of Treywick and Southwick.
Yes, sir.
Where the development exits. Well, I just heard a while ago that the renters are not very active. But then later on, they became active because they're active in the community. So I got a little confused by that. I think that every house is going to have at least 2 cars, no matter what anybody else says. I think the average in South Carolina is 2.3 or 2.7 per household, but in townhouse maybe 2. That concerns me. What I'm terrified of is the delicate wetlands that we're going to disturb. And I brought my little thing up on here of me. The flow of the wetlands comes from over here, and it goes all the way across, and it ends up in Church Creek down here somewhere. And I'm just afraid that with the addition of the concrete, the fill, the deforestation they're going to have along the whole Southwick strip, it's going to cause flooding to overflow onto our properties. If it really rains hard, we get flooding out there now, and the pictures clearly show that. all I gotta say, there's a whole other bunch of things, but I think they were mentioned already, so.
Thank you.
I oppose it, just please ask me to keep.
We appreciate you coming. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, whoever's next, come on up. Thank you.
Good evening. I appreciate you taking the time for this. My name is Ian Lundell. I live on Edward Drive, which is actually a street that spans between Southwick and Dunwick. I've been here 13 years or so. I used to work at the top of the city of Charleston, so I've seen developments come and go, and things change for the good and for the worse. I'm opposed to this rezoning, and the reason for that is not because Middleburg hasn't done a fantastic job addressing a lot of our concerns. I attended the meeting last week. The individual was very transparent, and it seemed to really listen to our concerns, so I appreciate that very much. Where I'm coming from is I was there before Mungo Home was built, even on the side of Dunwick. And I was promised then that there wouldn't be a water issue. And I can tell you firsthand, if those homes were built, water has increased on the individual streets in the middle. So to hear that all these steps have been taken, I'm just kind of once bitten, if you would call it that. To say that another one's going to come in on the left side of me and that water won't be an issue. I just have a hard time believing that because I saw the deforestation occur on the other side, and water has been an issue. I'd also urge the commission that no more than 45 minutes ago, an individual stated that the traffic on Southwick is an issue. For 15 years, I guess he's been fighting to try to alleviate it. I'm not like politics or anything, but I'm having a hard time understanding that if the infrastructure and the traffic there is that hard that you've been lobbying 15 years to fix it, the solution is to add 100, 240 cars. I just don't get that. I'm not in that realm, but it doesn't seem to jive with what's being presented. And lastly, I'll leave with this: is, a lot of times we talk about single-family homes and the developers don't have a long-term interest. Maybe the home developers don't, but the homeowners hopefully do. And I think of revenue and property taxes and long-term and what that can mean for a community. And I think that outweighs sometimes the initial, basically, sudden surge of income when you talk about townhouses or apartment buildings. So I urge the commission to think, please, long-term about the community in general. And yes, Middleburg did a great job of addressing a lot of our concerns. And maybe homeowners do come in there and they do things that maybe aren't as ideal as what Middleburg can do. But ultimately, the tax revenue, the long-term goals, I think I'd rest my head on the pillow a little bit better when I drive down this street and see the homes, knowing that the community overall will be healthier, especially from an infrastructure standpoint. And maybe then we might actually have the fun to alleviate some of these traffic problems.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Yes, sir. Come on up, sir.
Chris Cannon, I live on 1 Morton Avenue. I own property at 1570 Catholic Avenue. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Charleston Council. I just barely got under the wire here. I say thank you. I'm just going to make a couple of quick points. I don't know if this has been brought up or not because I just came in. I apologize for that. First of all, we would love to see this land preserved. We understand. I don't want to put $2 billion lottery on one property and donate to the city. Okay? But we understand. I hope you will be able to do that. But the way it's zoned now, it's not depriving the owner of developing the property. But it may drive them up developing it at a higher profit. And that's not a reason to allow the zoning to be changed. The developer has made an effort to conservation movement when it's done to try to make it better for everybody. But the simple fact of the matter is still creating more density. And if anybody else hasn't pointed it out, I want to show you right here. I went and counted. There's 11 houses right here. 2 of them are 2-story houses. All the rest are 1-story houses. They all have very nice lots. You're going to put right in here 11 multi-family units across the street. That is totally, completely out of place for the entire area. Nothing in this area is developed like that whatsoever. That's the biggest problem I have with it. Let's see it not be developed, and could be developed single-family fine. But DR6, all those 11 multi-buildings, and they're this entire stretch here. And this is just a stretch here. We're talking about 11 multi-unit buildings. So we go that area there. And we're here, there's 11 houses, you can count them right here, and 2 of them are 2-story, all the rest are 1-story houses. And the Johnstown Council is still opposed to this, for basically the meeting I submitted, and what everybody else has brought up about traffic.
Ken, how long have you been on that commission? Many years, I think. Well, thank you for your, no, thank you for your work. I know you've been working on that a long time.
Chairman for 15 years.
Great. Thank you for your work, too, sir. Yes, sir. Who's next?
How's it going, y'all? I'm John Burley. I own a house at 1577 Trewick. I am in 100% agreement with pretty much everything all the other homeowners or all my neighbors have said so far. There's one major issue no one has brought up. I leave my house at 7 a.m. every single morning, and it takes me more than 30 minutes to get off the Johns Island because of Maybank. Maybank Highway is a choke point every single morning. I sit there and watch the light go through 6 different cycles. Yesterday, traffic from that light on River and Maybank was back all the way up to the crazy hour. And I sat there and I waited. I'm late for work every single morning. I have to be in my office on Coleman Avenue in Mount Pleasant by 8 a.m. I'm 5 minutes late at 2 in the morning. And I keep leaving earlier and earlier and earlier, and it doesn't make a single difference. Adding 160 more people on this island, getting off of Maybank every single morning, come on now. I mean, that's part of my French, but that's pretty messed up. You know, I mean, nothing's being done to mitigate any of that kind of stuff, and we're just adding more and more people on the island. Something's got to give at this point.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming, too. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Hi, Barry Cohen. I own the house at 1574 Southwick. And everybody covered pretty much most of the things I was going to bring up already, with the exception of I bought the house about 5 years ago now, and I researched where to buy around here when we moved down this way. And I picked this particular spot because it had this beautiful patch of woods behind it, and I knew someday it was likely to get developed and all that. But knowing that, I looked at what the zoning was for, and it was single-family homes. I said, okay, I'm totally fine with having houses around me. Yeah, it's a suburban area, and the character of the neighborhood is great. It's where I want to raise my family and maybe live out the rest of my life. And to change it now, to put townhouses and completely change the character of the neighborhood, I think is a shame. And it just, I think it's going to affect our property values as well. I just don't think it's right to go ahead and change that and rip the rug out from everybody that moved into the area with expectations that it was going to be like that. I understand that the developer has a right to do build on the property. There's no arguing that. But I'm really, really opposed to the townhomes. I wish nobody would do anything with it, but I certainly don't want to see townhomes there. Single-family homes, whole different story. From my point of view.
Thank you.
And property values are important to me as well. And the other question I have too is all the wetlands that are going to be maybe having trails and parks and things like that built in. Who owns that in the end? If it becomes conservation land, does the developer own that, or does the city own
We'll
it?
answer that at the end, and we'll get an answer. So yes.
And another follow-up question to that is, who's going to police it? Who's going to pick up trash out there? And if there's bad things going on in the night out there, who's going to be looking at that and patrolling it? Let's say it's in our backyards.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming, sir. Who's next? Come on up, ma'am.
My name is Christian DeWitt. I live at 1564 Trewick. And while I would like to echo everything my neighbors have said, because I don't disagree with anything that they've pointed out, I would like to make a correction. When you're talking about flooding and taking away land that can be used for some of that rainwater, right? It's not that the water is in our front yards. It already is. I can tell you that I'm fortunate enough to be one of 4 homes that's built up on a crawl space. My neighbors are not. They are built on concrete slabs, and any flooding on my street would result in it directly going inside of their homes. I've been there. I've almost seen my neighbors get flooded twice already this year, and that is not from the hurricanes. That's just been from heavy rain. We haven't even had a king tide this year, so I can only imagine the flooding that is going to happen in the near future because of where we are. You mentioned, sir, that there's no issue with local wildlife. I would like to challenge that claim. I personally have 2 owls that live in my backyard. One is barred owl. The other one I haven't been able to identify yet, only because he is smaller, but is definitely a different species. Barred owls are protected under the Migratory Act. We also have Cooper's hawks, commonly, and those are also protected under the Wildlife Act and the Migratory Act. So we do have wildlife that would be impacted by this. I know I've personally looked at registering my backyard as a safe haven for these species, because we do have a lot of migratory species that come to the island, and that it's very important. on top of the flooding issues and the things that my neighbors have stated, I've lived in Charleston my entire life. I'm probably one of the few people in this room who can say that my family's been here for generations. I grew up on James Island, and when I grew up, Johns Island was mostly rural. That's where we used to go and hang out as kids, to get away from our parents. No judgment, thank you. But to see what the island's turned into is kind of disheartening. I purchased my home specifically because it was in a single family residential neighborhood. I purchased my home because I didn't want to be around the apartment complexes because there has been, and townhomes included in that, the Charleston area has seen a spike in vandalization of vehicles, which you tend to not have in single family home residential areas, but prevalent in the apartments and specifically the rental communities. I love my home, I love Charleston, and I would appreciate it if you could keep Johns Island as intact as possible.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you coming. Who's next? Come on up, sir. Yes, sir.
My name's Brent Maddox. I live at 1623 Southwood Drive, which is right in the corner of Treywick and Southwick. We talked earlier about the amount of traffic that comes through there. It's one of our primary concerns. We've seen a steady rise in accidents. The speeding that's been calculated in that area is much higher than 40 miles an hour on average. We see a lot of people coming through there doing in excess of 60. You add an intersection with what was proposed in this plan to that between the new development and Southwick. I'm afraid you're going to see somebody die there in the next year or two, as those types of accidents still occur. We mentioned we had a car flip over the other night, in the corner, but I've seen evidence of people going into the ditch right in front of my house for no apparent reason. These types of things happen all the time on Southwick, and without re-engineering that entire road, it's going to continue. And with an increased number of houses, increased number of families, somebody is going to end up getting hurt in that area if we allow this to come in. That's a big concern for me. The other thing I have is just maybe a clarifying question. In one of the slides, it showed that there was going to be an exit from this new development out to Southwick in the corner of, or right at Treywick. My question, that's maybe a good representation. My question is that this was brought up as a code issue to add that exit there. If that's a code issue, and this didn't get approved, where's the other exit going to go? I mean, it's almost as if this is being outlined as we have to abide by code by allowing this backside of this development to have a point of exit beyond just Maybank. So if this didn't get approved, where's the exit? How are we abiding by code with what it is today? I would like to maybe have the answer to that
See
question.
if we can get you in here. Thank you too, sir. Thank you for coming. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Bradley Taggart, 1633 Jesse Elizabeth Road on Johns Island. There are some really good reasons for the Planning Commission to deny this rezoning request. The first is neighborhood opposition, which is apparent. The second is that Johns Island is the most infrastructure challenged region of this city, with no major employers, no easy way to reach major job centers. Upzoning this parcel will make that situation even more difficult for residents. Perhaps the biggest reason to deny the requested upzone is it does not actually appear to fit with the city plan for this area. This is supposed to be a low-density suburban zone. I noticed that was skipped over when we were talking about the parcel. The two nearby neighborhoods that the city plan gives as an example for what's desired for this parcel are Riverland Terrace and St. John's Woods, and they don't have this type of dense attached development there. As you're all aware, the number one reason to deny a request upzone is if it doesn't fit the city plan. And for this reason, in addition to the resident opposition and added traffic, I ask you to deny the request.
Thank you for coming, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, yes, sir. Come on up. Don't be bashful.
John's lawyer with the Johns Island Task Force.
3 points. First, I want to clarify something, and that's the city's going to have an easement on the phase 1 roads, so that no matter who builds on this property, they won't be able to have access to the phase 1 property. So the idea that these won't ever be connected if the current developer doesn't buy it, that's incorrect. The second thing is, we've been hearing about buffers and wider buffers and trails. But again, this is not a PD request. This is all that is just promises that they go away as soon as this meeting is over with. But finally, I want to talk about affordable housing. I mean, it's a critical issue in Charleston, not just the city, but the county. And you've adopted, the planning commission and the council have adopted a lot of zoning ordinances that encourage developers to add affordable housing units through incentives. And as Mr. Morgan said, the developer could use a conservation development with affordable housing incentives to do everything they say they're going to do. They don't need a rezoning. They can do it right now. Instead, they want to rezone. So it really begs the question, and I know you are all really worried about affordable housing. Does the developer simply have to come in and say, I want a rezoning, and therefore they don't have to provide the affordable housing unit incentives? Provide the affordable housing units with the incentives that the very thing you're trying to accomplish. They're going away from it by simply upzoning. And so really, we request that you deny this and that the developer pursue conservation development with affordable housing units. They get what they want, you get what you want, but you've been striving for years. So I hope that's what you do. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you for coming. Anyone else? Great. Guys.
I missed one of my main points because I was so stinking.
Ma'am, very, very quickly, because we want to move on, but very, very quickly, if you would.
Yes, yes, yes.
Very quick.
The whole reason why I came here, again, Christian DeWitt, Sherwood Avenue, was because the proposed other entrance onto Southwick is across from my street. My concern with that is twofold. One, I'm now aware that you haven't walked the property line. I can tell you, and maybe some of my neighbors can attest to it, I skate these roads very frequently. The distance between that curve and the entrance to Treywood is not very far. I constantly have issues taking a left turn to get to Maybank as it is. If you add another road directly across from mine, that kind of has the right of way because it's a simple right turn onto Southwick. There is going to be an absolute cluster from everyone who's trying to come out of my street. And the visibility around that curve is dangerous already. I've had multiple times had to slam on my brakes because people, yes, it is a speed, but also it's a blind curve. There's no way to see around it. If that is the exact entrance point, there will be accidents.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, thank you. All right, so we asked the applicant, so everyone has spoken, who wants to speak on this issue. The applicant, please address some of these issues, give us any concern, answers you have. I see you have Mr. Whalen there.
I'm just going to point out something.
Yes, sir. We know who you are, but tell the crowd who you are too.
So what happens is primary drainage in this area is a route that comes through here, goes through the bottom here. There's a very large, you can just see the edge of it there. What happens on the properties up there, they drain to Southwick. And that's where the problems typically are. They don't have any detention in their community. And so therefore things can overwhelm swamp and pond. What will happen there, they drain this direction. All this land slopes down to this larger drain. There's nothing that can happen on this property that sends drainage uphill into their community. They have the perspective. Very large ditch that comes down through here. And that actually is not a problem. It runs clear and it's not fettered or anything we've ever seen plugged up. What happens is drainage that comes from their community across to the system here and then down is part of the problem. And so what I think would happen out of this is that there will end up being actually, as something happens along Southwick, there'll be attention to the community to try to go ahead and get that plugged up portion in their community where they don't have any detention opened up into this ditch system which runs clear. So this way as well as this way.
Can you address Mr. Whalen again, because it was brought up and you have the expertise to the development proposed, how would it not make things worse or affect any of that?
In terms of drainage, they're downhill. You can't make the water go uphill. It's that simple. And I've been working on it here for 36 years. have watched what's been happening in pattern of things in this particular site, you can't make the water go back.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Hold on.
So just a few brief points on some of the things that were mentioned. A lot of the comments were similar to the things that we heard at the neighborhood meeting. And you feel that some of the comments in the original narrative address them, but we understand a lot of the points and can reiterate them in a question session with the planning commission afterwards. So I think there was something about a threatened endangered species. We had a professional consultant come on the site and do a threatened endangered species analysis, both of our site and the surrounding site. That is something that's performed by a professional consultant, and they informed us based on a 150-page study that there's no threatened endangered species on our site. So that's due diligence that we don't have to do prior to meeting, but we did. Another thing that we haven't walked the site, we have walked the site many times, both our consultants and us have walked the site, so we're aware of the situation in there and have walked and driven along Southwood Drive to get a feel for the traffic situation. We talked about traffic a lot, and I think I just want to go back to the by right zoning. We did, again, we don't have to do a traffic analysis for this meeting, but we did a trip generation calculation, and the by right zoning is more trips than we're proposing today. So anything we're talking about, increased traffic, intersection congestion, we are proposing a solution that minimizes that. If you want to talk about an empty site versus development, sure, there's going to be more trips. But when you're talking about a rezoning from a by right to RDR6, there are less trips generated and less impact on that traffic infrastructure. And again, traffic is an important issue to us. Again, I don't believe that our residents would necessarily be big offenders to the speeding, but we have proposed reflective pavement. We proposed paying out of our pocket for a new speed sign that has radar enforcement on it. The blind corner is something that we didn't specifically bring up, but we are going to study that corner. Obviously, the blockage of the view is by the trees right now. If we are to do our development, there is potential that we could leave the tree line back farther from where our development is to provide more visibility around that corner. And the only reason I did bring that up is because we haven't finished the study yet, but we're going to look at a site analysis of that corner, and I believe that would definitely improve the situation. Lastly, if there were another developer on this site that were developed there, it would be a non-exclusive easement for the road use and whatnot. So private roads with public access. So the continuity and the shotgun approach to development, we believe that our proposed use fits that. And lastly, on affordable housing, we believe that any supply to the market helps with alleviating the demand. I mentioned before, I think Ms. Jacobs mentioned this at the last planning commission. We are the missing middle. We are the attainable rental option when you're surrounded by single family homes. And so we believe all that certainly contributes to more attainable housing on Johns Island for people and families.
Somebody had asked a question, if you develop this plan to do some of the trails, would you be maintaining these trails and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's a city easement with our maintenance we would provide the maintenance on it and public easement to use it. I'm not sure the exact logistics behind it, but we would maintain
that would be required by the city, I guess. If you all build those of private developers, they would be maintaining, I guess.
Yeah, it's our property and we would maintain.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. That's going to close the public aspect of this. Did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's going to close the public aspect of this. I'd ask commission members questions, comments.
I do have a question, and I think Mr. Morgan might be able to respond to this one. Some of the members of the public are saying, essentially that these promises, like the traffic reduction plans, the traffic signaling with the radar detection, and other issues are things that would essentially are said here today for the benefit of this rezoning application. But how much of this we get translated down the road into the TRC process? Because even though we're looking simply at the rezoning of this, we obviously have an applicant saying you're going to do this X, Y, and Z, but how much of that gets translated to TRC? at the end of the day.
I mean, staff can certainly relay what has been discussed today. It's in the minutes and things like that, but there is no conditioning of a zoning like that. That is correct, that there is no conditioning of it. I will say that, the design of the development, the first phase of their development, the hamlets, they have followed through on all the things that they said they would do on that, and those are now codified as that site plan. And they're saying that they want to develop this in a similar fashion. So I would assume that they would be holding true to that, but not something we can condition.
Mr. Lassane?
I had a similar question in a similar vein. One question or statement that was made during the public comment was that what's to prevent the developer or future developer from developing the sort of the set-asides, the areas that are developable that are being set aside and not developed in this development. What's to prevent them from being developed in the future if there's an ownership change?
And there, is not something there. No conditions. The conservation zoning does help, show the fact that, it would make no sense to fill those wetlands because conservation zoning only allows a house every acre and a half of highland area. And if you've got no highland in it, then you can build no houses there. So.
Yeah, but I guess as Mr. Lassane said, there's 27 developable. They're talking about developing 16.7. How about the other 10? Other questions, comments, commission members? Ms. Jacobs?
Some of that 10 would be taken up with the buffers and
And boardwalks. And
some of that 10 would be taken up. It would become the exact 10. In other words, they're losing acreage all the time in what is proposed.
Right.
So it's not an absolute one-to-one.
Okay. And also, if we were to,
But really, again, do you want to if you want to ask them a clarification?
yeah, just on the logistics of that, if we were to build our 160 units on our 16.7 acres under DR6, then there's no more allowable density on it.
No developer can come in later because you have your 6 times up on acres that's built. You can't go develop that.
Mr. Morgan, that's
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right, thanks. Yes, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you.
Christopher, I tend to buy the argument that single-family homes in general probably have more cars and more traffic and so forth in this type of use. And they can build by right, I think 128. Would 128 single-family homes fit on this property?
It depends on how you configure them. If somebody did do a conservation-oriented subdivision, there's a lot of background that has to be done. You have to do a whole bunch of evaluation of the best parts of the site for building on, where the best trees are, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of upfront work. You all saw an appeal not long ago of a conservation subdivision that was not happy that city staff had not granted it endorsement. It shows how much work goes into those. There's a tremendous amount. But were somebody to undertake that, they could have a limit on the minimum lot size for a single family house as long as they left at least 50% of the site as undeveloped. And then they could also do townhouses, even though it's zoned single family, as long as they had the requisite amount of affordable housing within those townhouses.
Other commission members, questions, comments, motions?
I guess I think just from a logistics standpoint, the idea is that 160 units would fit on 16 acres of land, and that with your townhome proposal.
No, I guess there's obviously we heard several items. Traffic is bad on Johnstown. There's no question about that. Anybody sees that. I stay away from Main Road, especially off 17 as much as I can. I still try to stay away from there. And I feel for you folks. The speeding issue is something that needs to be enforced for the city police department of the Charleston County. They need to be out there, and they do it from West Ashley when they see when Donovan Jacobs calls them her name, but they're out there taking them to death, and it slows them down. So I hear you with some of those issues. So other comments, questions, motions? Ms. Jacobs?
It's always hard when you have the community come out and really give you all these passion about all the details of their effect. I do know that most of Johns Island was built, it was built without our new stormwater manual. And our new stormwater manual creates an incredible burden on anybody that's going to be there for anything. Just because they get by right zoning, whatever is there now, or whatever we choose to give them tonight, doesn't mean that that TRC application is going to allow them to put every single one of those homes on the land. It's a very extensive process. And one of the big reasons we did that was the concerns of people who live in areas that they'd already built without these considerations, and now they have flooding for one reason or another. These TRC reviews, you cannot build and impact anybody else. You can't do it. You have to prove that you can. And if you can't prove that, you don't get your goal. So just because this applicant tonight is coming for a rezoning to do a proposal, they could get a TRC for 2 or 3 years, proving that they would never impact your land or water. That's the way the city has responded to the public about flooding. Mr. Whalen eloquently told us that water doesn't flow uphill and that their development is downhill, and that there might even be some possibilities in this development where the system might help in some regards or not. So it's very difficult to, as a homeowner who my neighborhood flooded because the highway was raised years ago, until they built a very sophisticated flooding system. I lived on a lake every time it rained. It was very hard to hear that. But I do know that the city has set out all the regulations forward so that people can continue to have housing. And I am a very big proponent of this. I don't think townhomes are a detriment to the community. I live next to almost 100-year-old neighborhood that's full of townhomes within the neighborhood and on one of the main boulevards, South Windermere Boulevard, and within Old Windermere, it's full of towns. So they're very much don't impact me. So with all of that said, I'm going to move for approval because I think this application heard everything that we said last month. And planning commission, I think they look at the community. I think they're doing everything that they can do within a zoning right to do. I know that their life through TRC will not be an easy one until they get that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Other comments, questions, or second to the motion? No, I'm gonna second Ms. Jacobs' motion. It's difficult, I feel, but staff had talked about this early when they actually recommended last month when the density, or actually the development was different. It's actually more conservation now. And I think that it, as I said, this property sits up. This is where the city was questioned. The city actually says this is where, correct me if I'm wrong, that's more you see some density. Is that correct?
Absolutely, based on the comprehensive plan, it's an area that is recommended.
Someone had mentioned, I think the gentleman from on the commission said that, and the plan actually says this here. So
4 to 8 units an acre for this area, the Highland areas, yes.
for those reasons, and again, I feel for the folks from Johns Island, we need to get the police department out there and pull people over for tickets. Those roads, I hope, God willing, I don't know if we'll ever see whatever. I don't know if you're for or against it, 526 in my lifetime, but or hopefully we'll see improvements in my lifetime. But I'm gonna second Ms. Jacobs' motion. Other questions or comments? If not, all in favor of Ms. Jacobs' motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor and 2 opposed. Thank you, and thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. We hear you. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is well, for the planned unit development.
I have my notes. I was like,
Next item on the agenda is HUD amendment number 2. Number 2 is Brewster Court, Banner Street, Cumming Street, and St. Philip Street, Canterbury, LA Borough, Peninsula, TMS number 460080. 804 015 016 017 037 042 043 075 through 081 083 through 088 090 and 094 through 110. approximately 1.39 acres. Request amendment of the residence coming to Cannon Street Plan Unit Development PUD Master Plan. Development guidelines change the permitted uses to allow commercial short-term rentals for all properties within the PUD. Mr. Morgan, this you?
Me.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, so we're returning again to Canterbury, Elliotsboro, and talking about short-term rentals. I'm not sure how many different times, but I think we're up near to 10, 11, something like that. So
We'll hear it again, but that's okay.
So that is essentially the request here is to amend this PUD that was approved I think it was about 15 to 20 years ago, something like that. Some of the folks who live in the area may know exactly, but I think 15 to 20 years ago, so the PUD was approved. To amend it to allow for short-term rentals in the development. To orient you all to the area, this is Cannon Street running east-west, St. Philip here, running north-south, and Cumming Street. The center of the development was a new street that was created, Brewster Court, and it has a couple of little side alleys that feed off of it as well. And we'll go into some images here, and I'll also show you exactly what the language is that would change in the PUD. Here is an aerial image of the parcels that are part of the PUD. Here it is in our future land use. It's in our neighborhood designation. So, the densities of the PUD are in line with, what is in the surrounding area. And I think that's part of the reason that the PUD was endorsed and approved and built. So no issues there. Of course, our neighborhood definition is a mix of uses and things like that. So, in line there. Where we really get into the big discussion here is with the short-term rental overlay, which of course Canterbury, Elliotsboro requested and was approved. Essentially that allows a lot of these short-term rentals in commercially zoned properties within their neighborhood boundaries. And there's a good bit of commercial in that neighborhood. You'll see the LB that's shown here in the pink color. You'll also see this PUD that is subject of tonight's discussion right here in the purple. And in their neighborhood goes across St. Philip and over to King Street where there's a good bit of commercial and things like that. So this is really about, what's going to happen precedent-wise, and as the other cases you all have seen in this neighborhood, precedent-wise, because with the conversion of single-family housing to, or just residential units to STR, that sets a precedent that could jeopardize the residential nature of these streets that are shown here in tan, and these streets down here that are shown here in tan. And so that is, where we're trying to make sure that we preserve as much of the character of the neighborhood as possible. Is the existing PUD for the area, and it talked about the housing that was going to be there. There are a couple of corner buildings that have some commercial in them, so it was a mixed-use PUD. Layout of the PUD with the different lots. There are commercial sites in the PUD here at this corner at Cumming and Cannon, and over here at St. Philip and Cannon that have commercial storefronts in them. So a little bit of mixed use, but it's predominantly a residential PUD. The amendment would allow things that are in the GB allowances of our zoning ordinance to be here, but they would be limited to short-term rentals. Therein, that should this be adopted, folks in this development could convert their units to allow for short-term rentals, which at present they aren't allowed to do. You might remember that our general staff policy that we've been following the last 5-6 years is that we do not recommend for conversion of existing residential structures to commercial of the short-term rentals in this area, and this would be against what we have been following for that time period. And you might remember that all the other cases that have requested similar things to allow for residential units to be converted to commercial have been turned down if they did not have a commercial history. The structures are all new, very attractive structures here. You've seen these images of the neighborhood, and that's the court that goes through the middle of it. Very attractive residential area here. That is what we have. And our recommendation is again for disapproval. We were very clear with the applicant during their application process that it was something that staff would not recommend for and that the neighborhood had had tremendous concern with in the past. But they proceeded to move forward with their application, as they have a right to do. We are very concerned that this sets a bad precedent for the rest of the neighborhood that would lead to conversion.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Is applicant with us? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Matt Bicette. I'm here for the owner, Ty Costa. Thank you guys for the opportunity to be here speaking to you guys today. The application submitted by Mr. Costa is not seeking to commercialize the Midtown development. He initially sought to just convert his lot. He's the owner of 7 Brewster. And the city staff recommended that we amend it to include the language that is before you guys today. Talk about a commercial history. I used to live in this area. That area is primarily commercial, restaurants, bars, and you got college students running around there. We've spoken with the Midtown Community Association, surrounding neighbors, and local business owners. None of them objected to Mr. Costa's application. This area, prior to what is now known as Midtown, was an old gas station and some dilapidated buildings on that block, some of you may recall. Mr. Costa and his family plan to live there the majority of the time. They're seeking simply the ability, the option, if they are out of town for an extended period of time. They don't want to make this a transient commercial property. We don't believe this application, if approved, will turn Midtown into a transient commercial property. The Midtown Community Association owners voted to change their master deed over a year ago. And none of them sought to do a short-term rental yet. This application is going to assist the owners in keeping their properties in good order and repair if they're out of town for a extended period of time. Which, as the ordinance says, that's the purpose of it. Help stabilize homeownership, maintain property values, strengthen the economy of the city. This application does all those things that the short-term ordinance states for the purpose of it. And Mr. Morgan mentioned precedent, and I agree with that. And I want to tell you guys why this application, this spot, is unique and would not create a precedent if it is approved. Midtown is a community association that has a master deed and regulations. Regardless of ownership down the road, these regulations are going to attach the state of these properties. In addition to that, these regulations are strictly enforced and intended to protect the neighborhood. They're aware of the character of the neighborhood. Nobody wants to change that. There's an established property management company, hosting company, they've been here forever, many of you guys heard of them, that manage and oversee Midtown and implement all these regulations. And not all the properties in Midtown will become short-term rentals if this is approved. Most of these houses are owner-occupied now, and they'll continue to be so afterwards. And you're not taking any sort of standard rental market housing off the market. You're not losing affordable housing. And the association regulations not only protect all the folks in Midtown around Mr. Costa who are for this, but also all the businesses and everybody else around them in the neighborhood. And in some of those regulations, I think there's some information that some of the folks who may have commented online don't have, or the city did not have. There's some of these regulations that will help govern and protect the neighborhood. All short-term rentals have to be approved by the board of the Midtown Community Association before the start of the rental. And that board has a fiduciary duty to protect the neighborhood and look out for everybody and enforce the regulations. The owner is required to provide the board with identification of its renters in advance. Any listing of a short-term rental is required to state that the rental is subject to the regulations of the association. And all tenants are required to be provided
with a copy of those regulations and advise of them by the owner. And some of those specific regulations you have in there. It states, no offensive or illegal activities shall be carried out on any lot. The association has the right to determine what may be offensive. They're self-regulating each other. They hold each other accountable in Midtown. Nothing shall be done on any lot which is or may become an annoyance or a nuisance to any owner in the community. There are no buses, no boats, no boat trailers, no ATVs, no motorcycles or similar vehicles permitted to be kept on site. If you're concerned about traffic, the regulations are restricted to the 2 off-street parking spaces for each unit. No on-street parking is allowed. So there are not going to be any additional cars in the neighborhood if this application. The regulations require no garbage cans, no supplies, bottles, toys, and similar items are allowed to be kept on the outside of the property. So there won't be any additional trash or anything like that. It may be an eyesore or affect the neighborhood. The association oversees this and has the right to levy fines on owners who don't comply with these regulations. So that's just another way that this area would be regulated, and this is different from any other prior applications there may have been in the Canterbury-Elliotboro neighborhood. This application will not set a precedent because it's a unique situation. It's got an extra layer of oversight to protect the character of the neighborhood in the association, who has a fiduciary duty to do that. This is not some one-off lot with no association oversight. This is going to assist the property owners by maintaining their property value and upkeeping their properties, which is going to assist the city as well, and also is going to continue to protect the current character of the neighborhood. Yeah, thank you guys for your consideration. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Tell me your name again, just for the record.
Matt Bizet.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Would anyone like to speak in favor of this application? Would anyone like to speak in opposition? Great. We got a lot of hands here. If you would do me the same favor as we did the last item, please, if somebody makes a point, please don't be repetitive, and we appreciate you being as brief as possible. Yes, sir. Tell us who you are.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, my name is Marion Hawkins. I'm the president of the Canterbury-Elliotboro Neighbor Association. This PUD was developed in the mid-2000s, and the whole purpose of a PUD or planned urban dense development is the density. And so the primary density is residences, which this consists of 31 residences and 2 commercial spaces. Each residence has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. One commercial space at one end of the property is a financial services firm that's been there for a while. At the other end of the property has been a hair salon. These residences started selling in 2007. And this has been a really vital part of our neighborhood because it's always been full-time residents as well as non-student rentals. And so we do value this residential housing in our neighborhood. A little background, the SDR overlay was established in 2012. After 2 years of study by our neighborhood, we voted unanimously support it. No other neighborhood in the city supported it, so the overlay was created for this special for SDRs in 2012. Commercially zoned properties along Spring, Cannon, and St. Philip, which have been historically transient and engaged in commercial use were eligible. Residential properties meeting the requirements of off-street parking and being owner-occupied were eligible for a B&B permit. And then also in 2018, the ordinance was expanded. Y'all got some scratches and bruises from all that, and expand the city to have greater owner-occupied STRs. Our neighborhood, the Canterbury-Elliotboro Neighbor Association, has consistently opposed up-zone requests for properties from residential to commercial in order to keep our neighborhood diverse as well as preserve housing stocks for residents. Permanent residents, long-term renters, retails, and service businesses, restaurants are needed to ensure a vibrant and thriving neighborhood. We do not want the entire neighborhood to turn into one large SDR. Prospective owners and developers are always encouraged to buy property with the zoning needed for the intended use. The owner of this property is an out-of-town investor, lives in Nantucket, bought this property in May 26th of this year, for a pretty high sum of $1.2 million. So I think they can afford the upkeep of this. And the applicant is represented by a realtor who represents the owner of the purchase. I'm sure they were well aware that the SDR ordinance has been in place for 12 years, and they would have full knowledge of the requirements for SDR permits. These existing 31 residences have no commercial history and were clearly bought for residential use. Regardless of the internal self enforcement that the PUD or the HOA says they will do, you all know once zoning is in place or an upzone, it can't be taken back. So regardless of whatever mechanics they propose to do, once that upzone is provided to commercial, it cannot be taken back. These existing 31 residences, if you look at the numbers, 31 residents will total 93 bedrooms and have a capacity for over 250 guests. This would be the highest concentration of STRs ever in our neighborhood in Charleston. If this request is granted, it will set a dangerous precedent and will result in other properties seeking to upzone, which will displace housing, which is so desperately needed by our city. Essentially, we would lose the residential element of our neighborhood. So we respectfully ask the commission to deny the request.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your work as well, as president. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joe Cannon, and I've lived in this neighborhood at least 40 years. I taught in the neighborhood. I was the librarian at Rivers Middle School from about 1985 until it closed and became a different school. I knew a lot of people in the neighborhood, and I have a good feeling for the neighborhood. It used to be a place where you got to get your corn fixed, but that's a restaurant now. And the warehouse behind it is an event space. But I'd like to talk about the amount of STRs that are going to go in that spot, because that's looks like a hotel in the making without anybody working there. To see that there's no mischief going on. So I wrote down my thoughts. This project sounds like a hotel with no employees to check that all is quiet and everyone is behaving. I am reminded of a party at an SDR in our neighborhood where the father rented it for his daughter's 16th birthday. The party got out via the internet and people kept coming to it. And then someone got shot. This was in our neighborhood. People have complained about improperly run SCRs where trash cans are left out for weeks and parties occur late into the night. Now, these are managed by groups that are, people have them. And there's a group supposed to be managing. Yeah. But nobody's taking care of it. This buyer does not even live in our neighborhood. The real estate agent does not either. This was purely an investment to make money, and the request should have come before the property was bought. Will the buyer give us his personal phone number so that we can call him when mischief is brewing in the early morning? I don't think so. Will he be awakened by 2 a.m. by screaming drunk women? I've been, I don't know what it is about women, but you get some drunk ones at a party at 2 a.m. and they start screaming in the night, and it scares everybody. Or how about rowdy drunk men who are hollering?
They're not as bad as the women do.
We are a neighborhood. No, this just happened Halloween. And it's been a big, didn't it? It was a big to-do because the parties that went on till 2 a.m. We are a neighborhood. Something of this scale will be detrimental to the fabric of our surroundings. Personally, I think everybody, and I'm not against STRs. I own a house and a store. on a half an acre and a store in this neighborhood, the properties. And I'm not against this yours, but I am against property owners who are not responsible for their property. And I used to own 20 Limehouse Street, that's 6 apartments, and I went all over the neighborhood and gave them my phone number, and I said, something goes on in the night, you call me, I'm coming down out of my bed and coming down with the police. I had no problems. But that's not what's happening with the SDRs. And it's not what's going to happen with all these one unit together. This is a catastrophe in the making.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. Thank you for coming too. Appreciate you. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Olay?
Hello. Catherine Burlett, for Charleston Foundation for East Bay. On behalf of the foundation, we would respectfully encourage the commission to deny the application. Canterbury Borough has changed a lot over the last 10 or so years, and more properties have been converted to commercial uses, short-term rentals. However, this planning commission has been consistent in denying conversions to commercial zoning to allow for short-term rentals where residential uses have traditionally existed, and this application should be no different. Vibrant urban neighborhoods offer a good mix of commercial and residential, and should this application be approved, I think we all know what's coming. We will eventually see that all of these residents will convert to short-term rentals. A conversion of this scale, essentially half the city block, will dramatically alter the character of the neighborhood, rendering it predominantly a place of transient people, something that the short-term rental ordinance cautions against. Further, the recently adopted city plan, which you all worked so hard on, underscores the critical need for housing in the city of Charleston. Thus, it's incredibly important to preserve residential uses where they currently exist. To ensure that Canterbury Borough doesn't suffer from a monoculture of use and also remains a desirable place to call home on the peninsula, we would respectfully ask the commission to deny the application.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Olay. Yes, sir. Hold on.
Thank you for having us. My name is Will Green. I'm a resident of Canterbury, Borough. I'm also the vice president of the Canterbury Neighborhood Association. I wanted everybody's, we're talking about here that one unit, and we believe in the slippery slope, as you guys understand. To reiterate, people, I bought a house in this residential knowing with my real estate agent what I was getting into. I can't just go in and buy the lot and say, hey, I want to upzone this so that I can move it to be able to sell short term. I knew what I was getting into when I got into it, and I think that sometimes that gets lost in the mix. So here we are. But there's another important thing I wanted to say here. There are 6 principles in this application we're falling short according to City Planning Commission and how we want to plan, how the city wants to plan the city. Nurture inclusive, vibrant neighborhoods. The conversion of 31 residents to commercial use would remove residents. I mean, we're not going to have residents here that we have now. Through economic diversity, removing these residents would push the neighborhood toward all commercial use. We're trying to maintain a balance. I don't know how much the word balance has been said today, but this is what we fought hard for many, many, many years in Canterbury, Borough, and going through the short-term stuff that you guys are all aware of. It's a lot of pain and effort, but balance is important to create that vibrant neighborhood that we have now. We're really working towards it. Foster sustainability, adding additional commercial use over residential is not sustainable in our neighborhood. Reinforce the existing urban structure. Our urban structure is a balance of residential and commercial, not entirely commercial. Letting this go would allow tons of these behind it. We've been here before, you guys are very aware of it. Respect the growing scale and mix of the peninsula, the final mix of downtown commercial and residential use. And finally, number 6, use growth strategically. Growth is generally needed in a residential housing, not in commercial properties. So all these kind of fit that plan, do not fit that plan or reach that benchmark. And for us to keep coming back and coming back and coming back on these, I don't know where the message is being lost between the agents and the buyers, or if they just think, well, oh, they'll, some cities are different. But here we need, I implore you to keep the standard set as to, we're not gonna deal with these upzones. There's plenty of properties to do this with in our neighborhood. We'd love for them to purchase one of them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming too. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Hello. I'm George Holt. Right over here. This is the Charles Street condo development, and this is where I live up here. I'm really not the kind of person who complains about the noise and truck cars. But we all approved, sorry, I've lived here since 1995 in this house. In the neighborhood since 1982. We approved all this when they wanted to build it. It's no landscape place, and there was a kind of crazy thing on the corner over here. We just go back there. So we approved of this because we knew we need so many more houses in the neighborhood. Housing shortage, nothing compared to now. So we approved of this. The developer met with us. Everybody was on board, no complaints. We did it right. I don't know who these folks met with them. The neighborhood, they certainly didn't meet with me. And none of my neighbors knew about it because I asked everybody. And we have 10 houses in the street, and nobody knew about it. So I don't know, maybe he talked to some other people. I don't know. But he didn't talk to us. But again, we like this being residential. This is what we approved. This is what we wanted. The people were objecting, not us. So I mean, I understand, we're just 30 houses or something, and they want to turn into hotel rooms or suites or something. I'm not quite clear, but it could be really bad. I mean, gosh, how much work can you take, right? I mean, this is residential now. It's not even a commercial spot. Well, this is commercial, and that's commercial. But otherwise, you know, I kind of don't get it. We didn't know anything about it. No one told us about this. No one met with us. No one said anything. Well, my back bedroom door is 100 feet from the corner of the street.
Yes, sir.
Sorry about that. I hate to complain, but.
No, thank you for coming. We
All right,
appreciate
thank
it. We listened to it all, so thank you for coming. Come on up, sir.
I'm William J. Shandell. My wife and I live at 71 Ash Street. Everything's really been said by my neighbors. I'm also the chairman of the Episcopal Diocese Shoda. We built houses in the Camden Borough, Elliott Borough, and a few other neighborhoods, trying to be consistent with the city, desiring to see more owner occupants, preferably, but residential dwelling. This flies in the face of it. Again, everything's really been said, but this would threaten to essentially turn this area into a hotel, changing this section of Charleston from a place that we live to just a place that you stay. Really short-term rental, as opposed to, say, 6 months or a year. I think it's all been said.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Yes, sir. Come on up.
I think I'm the last.
My name is Chuck Waring, and we've lived in the area for 13 years. We live in Mount Pleasant. Went to school here, college here. Charleston's my home now. We bought in 2017 203 and 205 Centerville, which is 2 doors down. You got the Brown Sport Bakery, and then you've got the property here. When we bought that property, I'm an investor. We considered the zoning. It was zoned commercial. It was college students in there. They probably had 200 people cake parties. It was pretty torn up when we got it. So when I bought it with the zoning in mind, and we converted it to a short-term rental. We put a substantial amount of money into it, a lot of energy, a lot of time, and I think we added to the community in doing that. I don't know that, or I know that this rezoning request is not going to add anything to the community. So I would just respectfully request that you deny it.
Thank you for coming, sir. Yes, ma'am. Come on up. Whoever, come on up. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Allison Shandell, William's wife. I really don't like public speaking, so even a relatively small number of
We're all
people in the
friends here,
room.
so you go
I
ahead.
feel strongly enough about it as a full-time resident of the neighborhood to emphasize everything that has been said. And I'm glad that I don't have the luxury of being out of town for a long period of time so that I can be here, represent myself and the neighborhood, and ask for this.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you coming too. You did a good job. Yes, ma'am.
May I just pull my chair up and sit in it and read?
Ma'am, you go ahead. We can hear you, so go ahead. We can hear you. You stay right there. But if something's been said, the only thing I ask is not to repeat it if a point's been made, but thank you. I appreciate you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for listening.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Susan Griffin, and my home is 59 Bogart Street in Elliottboro, and part of the Peaksons Court Affordable Housing Development established in 2007 for first-time homeowners. I'm asking you to reject the request to upzone Brewster Court in what I believe Elliott Borough would simply become Charleston City Central Business District 2.0 over time. I'm using Peakson's Court as an example of why it is important to reject this application, even though ordinance language and law provide the right of application and hearing. After 15 years in existence, Peakson's Court now has not one, not two, but 3 babies in residence. To me, this is part of the definition of what it means to live in a real neighborhood, albeit an urban neighborhood. It is important to have multiple generations thriving and contributing to being a neighborhood. Homeowners here are truly the neighborhood's backbone and work very hard to promote, preserve, and protect it as such. We are the ones that put extra resources of our own money, vigilance, and time to keep it defined as a neighborhood. We are the direct link to city services when something needs to be done to protect our environs and to uphold the standard of civility and lawfulness. We call livability, we call the police, we call streets and sidewalks, parks, traffic and transportation, and parking enforcement. We are the ones who walk our children in baby carriages and first step walks in the neighborhood. We are the ones who think about repopulating Burke School one day with Peninsula children. We are the ones who use Elliott Borough Park and Garden and dependably support the neighborhood's small businesses. When the city of Charleston needs help, we are the ones who show up. We are currently putting our lives on the line to keep Elliott Borough a neighborhood, while others simply want to make money for themselves off our neighborhood. If we continue to say yes to this rezoning slippery slope, I fear it will become what it was when I first lived there. It was crazy times, Wild West behavior, streets, sidewalks buried in detritus, and not to mention what a much bigger burden on city services it would become. Do you really think college students and weekend bridesmaids and bachelor parties will be a good substitute for real residents? Give those children on Peakson's Court a chance to thrive normally in Elliott Borough. We have already lost 7 children in our area because the standard of livability and desirability of their parents to raise them in this downtown neighborhood became soured and hopeless. They could no longer see a normal future for them or their children. Please help us keep that normal future. I love living downtown. I enjoy my home. I enjoy my neighbors, and I want to be the best retired senior citizen I can be right here in Elliott Borough. With respect, thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, ma'am. Yes, sir, come on up.
Hey folks, Sam Spence from the Preservation Society. Just to crystallize things a little bit, I'll try to keep it pretty brief. The Preservation Society stands with Canterbury Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association and city staff in opposition to this PUD amendment request to allow short-term rentals as a permitted use, potentially displacing these 30 long-term units. As Will said a little bit earlier, when the commercial short-term district was created about a decade ago, care was taken to maintain some of that balance of residential uses in the area and make sure it stayed predominantly residential. And this commission has reinforced that time and time again. This particular development predates the overlay and contributes meaningfully, as was said, to this neighborhood's long-term residential housing stock. As my colleague from the Historic Charleston Foundation said, short-term rentals have already dramatically transformed this neighborhood, significantly impacting not just owners and long-term renters, but the reality of residents serving businesses in the area, effectively converting the entire city block would only hasten that imbalance. And just to reiterate, the city plan adopted last year zeroes in on Charleston's growing affordability crisis and the need to create and preserve available housing stock. Subtracting existing housing stock would be in direct conflict with this vision for our city's needs. In keeping with the value put forth in the comprehensive plan, we ask the Planning Commission to recommend this approval.
Thank you, sir. How long have you been on the Preservation Society?
Since July.
Okay, good to see you.
My second time here.
Okay, good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I would ask the applicant, would you like to address anything that was brought up? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Just a couple of quick points. I certainly understand everybody's concerns, appreciate your all's points, and respect that. We talked about out of town investors. Mr. Costa and his family are moving. You know, the property manager has everybody's information. You know, if there's things you guys want to talk about in terms of, hey, let's have a point of contact, happy to have these conversations with you guys. This is not going to turn this into a big hotel or 31, residences, taking them off the housing stock. It's all general business around there. You know, it's not seeking the upzone. It's seeking a specific limited purpose that is managed and regulated by the association and the board. And he has mentioned slippery slope. I've heard that in precedent. It's something that hasn't been addressed. I don't think any of the other applications had this. Is the association and the regulations and the board that's got a fiduciary duty to protect the neighborhood around us. And so I just ask that you guys consider all those, and if you have any questions, we're open to.
Thank you, sir.
Further discussions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kelly, as well. That'll close the public aspect of this. Commission members, Mr. Harrison.
So I kind of see this application very differently from the ones that we've already have seen before, because normally the property is asking for a rezoning from residential to commercial and asking for something of either LB, CT, what have you. But right now we're looking at a PUD, and a PUD already has the commercial elements, and thus it's by state law already meets the requirements of a PUD. But also when you look at this particular PUD, one thing that's really kind of dawned on me as I looked at it was the footprints of these buildings. If all these parcels were zoned GB in the beginning, number one, you wouldn't be able to put all these houses on this particular site. Number one being that a single family residence in a GB zoning would be required to have a 2,500 square foot lot and would only be able to occupy 50% of that lot. All of these houses are receiving the benefit of a PUD designation, which means essentially they were able to write an ordinance that essentially eviscerated the setback requirements, the lot coverage requirements. And so that's one of the benefits, so that that particular developer in 2005 could essentially develop that particular interior of this lot. And so when the comment about maintaining and upkeep, one of the reasons for that concept was that you had all these older homes that were on these commercial corridors that was one element in order to preserve. And for me, I think when you're looking at a PUD, it's really about the fact that you're trying to create this neighborhood. And by allowing this permitted, which essentially is a commercial use on top of the already commercial use, which meets the statutory requirements, is an unnecessary permitted use. And so I'm going to move that we deny or recommend denial of this application.
Thank you, ma'am. Second comments, Ms. Bailey, you go ahead, George.
I'll second.
I was going to second.
Okay. Do one. So,
Ms. Harrison made great points, and I think we'll also spare, if we deny this, we'll spare future HOA board the headache of dealing with this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this commission, this is for the record, this commission has been very consistent on this issue. And, I wouldn't recommend future property owners for coming back to ask this. We've dealt with this multiple times, and I'm confident that we're going to give a similar answer to this applicant as we've given previous applicants. So anyway,
I would like to echo Mr. Lassaine's comment, because I think on my very first meeting as a new commissioner, we dealt with the Ashley Avenue property, Mr. Lowe's property, who was dealt with. And we were very consistent.
Yeah, you're right.
We were very consistent with how we do that. The overlay was put there for a reason. I think it served its purpose. But we've also learned during the city plan, as everybody said, that we've got to preserve housing, regardless of affordable housing. We just can't lose houses.
Great. So there's a motion by Ms. Harrison, second by Mr. Bailey. Any other comments, questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's the motion is to deny the application. All in favor, so there's 8 in favor of denying the application. Anyone opposed? Great. So it's 8-0. Thank you all for coming too. Next item is the ordinance amendment to amend section 54-306 Old City Height District in Part 2, Old City Height Districts and View Corridor Protection of Article 3, site regulations, section 54-506, exceptions to setback requirements of Article 5, exceptions or modifications of the zoning ordinance of the City of Charleston to increase permitted heights of accessory structures. Who is this, Mr. Morgan?
Okay, well, we are
Oh, boy.
tonight the master.
What a treat.
I just say a few brief comments. So
Good. Thank you.
I was asked to write this amendment, by the way. I'm not necessarily advocating it, so this is a amendment to the exception.
You sound like a politician.
Sorry. The exception in the zoning ordinance that allows people to build accessory buildings in their backyards, notwithstanding any other setback rules that might prohibit that sort of thing. 25-foot rear setbacks, larger side setbacks are common in many residential areas. And this allows those setbacks to be reduced down to 3 feet off the side and rear property lines. But to meet those exceptions, or to get that exception, you have to meet these certain conditions. The size of the accessory building, height can't exceed 1.5 stories, 11 foot in height, which is still pretty substantial, actually. And so this amendment would seek to change that so that instead of the 1.5 story limitation on properties with a house of 2 or more stories in height, you would be able to build a 2-story accessory building 3 feet off the side and rear property line in the backyard. If you met those other conditions as well on the side and that sort of thing. So that's the change in effect. The first section 1 of this zoning ordinance amendment deals with the old city height districts and corrects, I think, a language that is currently in the code to make it any less confusing to people. But that's the main gist of it, is to allow 2-story accessory buildings when the main house is 2 or more stories in height. So, and so just to consider, 3 feet off the side and rear property lines means that you're building something very close to your neighbor. And I will say that we do get complaints and concerns about what's that building going up in my neighbor's backyard. And so I'm just trying to imagine what might happen when somebody builds a 2-story building back to somebody. So it is a substantial change in the ordinance. So just let you know.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Questions, commission members? Ms. Jacobs?
I have a question.
Yes.
Because the language is a little confusing to me. It's in that section F where it says exceptions underlined. If you go to the next page.
Right. Okay.
Move it to the next page. Thank you. Number 6, where it says accessory buildings shall not include a dwelling unit except where additional dwelling units are permitted on the lot by this chapter. And I thought we'd have a new accessory dwelling unit ordinance that sort of is allowing all these buildings to be dwelling units. So the language seemed reverse to me, unless I didn't understand. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't confusing or in conflict with the new ordinance.
It just simply is there to inform somebody who might be looking at this exception, thinking I can build a 2-story building in the backyard of my house and make it an accessory dwelling unit. But no, that's not necessarily true unless you meet other requirements.
Okay, I just wanted to,
zoning ordinance.
because it referenced, on the lot by this chapter, and I didn't know where it was referencing to, so I just wanted to make sure that wasn't confusing language.
Yeah, the chapter, the word chapter is there to reference the zoning ordinance.
Any other questions, commission members? Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Batchelder. Would anyone like to be heard on this? Okay, that'll close the public aspect. Other questions, commission members, motions?
I just am curious what the impetus for the Ordinances, just curious.
More flexibility for accessory dwelling units, give them more opportunities to exist. A lot of times people are willing to do one if they can have a garage underneath, and doing just like a story and a half or whatever can limit how much square footage you have in that accessory dwelling unit. It might only be a studio, whereas if you could do a full 2-story, you might be able to do a 1-bedroom or
Increase some housing stock. I'll make a motion to approve this. I think it makes sense. Thanks staff for coming up with that. Other questions, comments, or is it second?
I'll second it.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sargent. Other questions, comments? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Mr. Johnson, you got?
I'm opposed.
Okay, all right. No, you look like okay, so there's 7 in favor and 1 opposed.
I'm opposed.
Okay, I'm sorry. So 6 in favor and 2 opposed.
I'm mainly opposed because I'm trying to, I'm thinking about what Mr. Batchelder said, and I'm not quite comfortable with it yet, but it's obviously going to pass.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So 6 in favor and 2 in opposition. Thank you. So let's go on.
I could add a little sidebar here. Mr. Batchelder just celebrated his 35th year of service to the city.
Good for you, Mr. Batchelder. A little bit of history. I wasn't on the commission at the time, but before Hurricane Hugo, they had a commission meeting, as I understand from Mr. McCann. This is when the commission met across from the Mills House, fire station, old fire station. Y'all were boarding up, getting ready for Hugo having a commission meeting, and I think they were boarding up the building at that time. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Batchelder was here. That's 1989. So thank you for your service, Mr. Batchelder. So many years more. And zonings, now, Mr. Moore, could we take any zonings together?
These first 2 we need to do separately,
Okay.
but then we could probably move on.
Okay, great. Number 1 is 638 Tuxbury Farm, a portion and adjacent portions on Tuxbury Farm Road, Gainhart TMS 263-000-4046, a portion, and 042 and 053. It's approximately 10.32 acres. It was zoned, we're pressing on SR1. It was R1R in Berkeley County. Before we go, I want to, this young lady here who does, thank you for, we got a lot of them here, and I particularly like the one in Avondale. But anyway, thank you. We have 6, 1 being deferred, but I particularly like the one in Avondale. It was Jacobs. So anyway, Mr. Morgan, you go ahead.
Lots of
We
things
got
in
to
the
take
city.
1 and 2 separately, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
So this one, and will be in the same general area for both of these, is in the Kenoi Peninsula, actually, Kenoi here. I just realized, but I'll go to a different map that gives you a sense of where it is in Kenoi. But it is a request for SR1 in the city. It is out here off of 41, just north of the 41 bridge over the Wando. It's adjacent to a planned unit development that the Beach Company is developing here to the west. This is the parcels here. I think we've got another image. Here we go. This shows you where it is in Kenoi. Right at kind of one of the last outposts of the city here before you get to the Francis Marion Forest, which is up in this area. And in the comprehensive plan, it does recommend that this area be our kind of suburban edge. And that typically is less than 4 units an acre. In this instance, the SR1 is 4.8 units an acre. We feel like it's going to be okay here because of what they're doing on the adjoining parcel, where they're actually getting less density than they potentially could have had with a application for the DR12, and we'll get into that when we go to the parcels just to the north that are also part of this same annexation. Those parcels are right here. So when you see the whole context of the location, I think it makes sense that these have the designations that they do, and we think that in general they're still in complete conformance with, and because of the lesser amount of density on the parcels to the north. And again, here we're talking about suburban edge. And here is an image of the property, a photo of it from Highway 41. And then here's a photo from Tuxbury Farm Road, again, very rural area here. And our recommendation for this is for approval of the
Is
SR1.
applicant here? Would anyone like to be heard on this? Yes, ma'am. You come on up. No, you come on up, tell us who you are.
You've been here since 5?
Nicole Scott, lives in Pruitt, 205 King Street, Charleston. I've always been of the belief of less is more, and I think Christopher Morgan did a perfect presentation on this. As he mentioned, the adjoining parcels are up for rezoning as well. They will be developed together, but separately. As far as I know, Ray Waits, the property owner, is here. He's had several meetings, or at least one meeting with adjoining property owners in the area, and there's been no opposition. We can ask him if he has anything to add to that, but just thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for coming, ma'am.
Thank you.
Would everyone like, Ms. Waits, would you like to be heard?
Would you like to say anything?
You like to say anything, sir?
I just appreciate the opportunity to come into the city.
You've been in this city a long time, hadn't you, Mr. Waits?
Yeah, so last time I was down, we were fighting a development, which is opposite on the other side of Duxbury Farm Road. They're a very passionate developer, helped us see the light. And we,
Thank you for coming in the city.
Enough ever since.
Thank
So
you.
now I guess I'm turned around backwards the other way.
We're glad to hear that. So
Yeah,
thank
still
you.
looking for them great neighbors.
Would
This is one. This is the last one that bought out there where we are right now.
Would anyone else like to be heard on this? If not, I'll close public aspect.
I move for approval.
Mr. Bailey moves for approval, second by Ms. Johnson. Any other questions, comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That's 8 in favor, none opposed. Thank you all for coming and your patience as well. Number 2 is 715. Am I gonna say this right? Yepon Drive?
Yopon. I thought it was Yopon, but maybe that's me.
Drive, 26 and 2682 Highway 41, King Hort TMS number 263-000-4007 and 06, approximately 5.71 acres. Press zoning of DR 12, is that right? DR 12, zoned commercial, general commercial, GC in Berkeley County. Mr. Morgan.
Okay, and again, the one you just looked at was right over here. This is at Yopon and 41 and Tewksbury. There is an auto repair service on part of the property. That's why it's got the GC designation in Berkeley County. We'll go through here. There you see the auto repair. A lot of cars out there, so some redevelopment here might be a little bit more attractive. The properties in our neighborhood edge, which allows for up to 20 units an acre, and the request again is just for DR 12, so 12 units an acre. And out here, getting close to where the Francis Marion Forest is, but right near our kind of node of development around 41 and its intersection, and neighborhood edge, and see the reference to 6 to 20 units an acre. And here's current image of the property, and our recommendation is for approval for.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Would anyone like to be heard on this?
Same comments.
Okay, great, thank you. That'll close the public aspect. Motions.
I'll just move for approval. And I'll second.
Ms. Harrison, second by Ms. Johnson. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's 8 in favor, none opposed. Next item, and Mr. Morgan, you say, well, obviously number 4 is preferred. We can take any of the others, 3, 5 together or no?
I mean, we can go ahead and just do, 3 and 5 and 6. Let's do 6 separately.
Okay, number 3 is 17, thank y'all for coming. 1737 Jasmine Road, Pinecrest Gardens, West Ashley, TMS number 351120029.18 acres, request SR2, which is R4 in Charleston County. And number 5 is my favorite, which is 12 Riverdale Drive, Avondale, West Ashley, TMS number 418140088.25 acres. Request SR1, it was R4 in Charleston County. I say that because we always fight those donut holes in Avondale. So, Mr. Morgan.
Yes, sir. So again, these are in the midst of existing neighborhoods, the Jasmine location, because we have brought in other things in that area for SR2. It fits better for SR2 in the city. And then the site on, there's an image of it. And then the site that is on Riverdale is the bigger lot, so that's why the SR1 works better in this location. And you see the plan recommendation for suburban, and here's an image of the property here. So
Recommend approval.
yes, SR2 for Jessamine, and
Unless any of the staff or you folks would like to be heard on it, we close the public aspect and ask for a motion. Ms. Jacobs, is that a nod or yes of a motion?
No.
Okay, Ms. Jacobs, second by Mr. Lassane, all in favor, signify, and that's items 3 and 5. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's 8 in favor, none opposed. Number 6 is 3306 Bonanza Road, Carolina Bay, West Ashley, TMS number 307 000000006. I think I have enough O's. Approximately 0.91 acres. Request rezoning of GO, General Office. It was zoned single-family residential R4 in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
And so this is a little bit of a change from the residential that it has in Charleston County. It's a fairly new single-family residence, and I believe it's a contractor that lives in it, right, Molly? And they would like the flexibility in the future to, rent it or sell it for office use, and so that's why they've asked for the GO here. Just to orient you, this is just off Savannah Highway where Bonanza Road is. There's commercial across the street in Charleston County, and then single-family residential also across the street a little bit to the north. And then to the rear is multifamily. To the south is, I believe that's the Jehovah's Witness congregation to the south. The property is in our neighborhood edge, so that is one of our more intense recommended land use districts. It does associate with commercial uses, and I think it's designated neighborhood edge because of the commercial that's across the road and the multifamily that's to the rear. So with that, what's in the plan, we felt comfortable with the general office request. And I'll just show you a few pictures here. This is the subject property on the site. And we do recommend for approval of the GO.
Thank you. And obviously, no one, I don't think, wants to be heard.
One question I do have, will they have to come back for a rezoning once they've been annexed, or?
No, they were.
Well, they're getting, in other words, they have their annexation in process. They're getting their zoning. Y'all are making a recommendation tonight, then it'll go to city council. And then typically we do the final read of the annexation with the final read of the zoning.
Okay. All right.
Is that a motion by Ms. Harris?
Yes, that's a motion.
Great, thank you. Ms. Jacobs, do you have a second or
No,
a question?
I don't have a second because I'm technically opposed to this rezoning. I drove the area, and even though it's neighborhood edge and there's the commercial across from it, when I went and drove the area, it gave me a totally different flavor. First of all, there, because I talked to Mr. Morgan about this, there's no time limit of operation on a GO. So we're sitting, right across the street is a nice ranch level home. That whole street is, very much like just a nice residential area. It's all high density apartments behind it. It's all residential behind it. It's residential on the other side of it. And there's all sorts of.
So that's a 24/7. GO is what you're saying.
Yes, and GO.
So
also, there's some intensity of uses that can go in there. And that street right now does not have a light to get out to it. So it has a lot of ingress and egress to the business. The only way to get out is to go through the neighborhood to get out, or to come way down the frontage road, thank you, and through a neighborhood an apartment complex to get out to Carolina Bay. So I started looking at that and I thought, it's kind of deep into a neighborhood for a general office zoning. I can see something softer if they wanted to have a contractor's office there. I'm not opposed to residential office. But when you start getting something that has no time limit on its hours of operation, and it's pretty deep into that area, even though there's this whole frontage area that could be developed, it gave me heartburn, so I'm not going to support this.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Mr. Morgan. GB versus GO hours of operation.
So GB is allowed, has uses in it that typically do go 24 hours a day. They're, convenience stores, things like that. Right. So GO doesn't have limits on the hours of corporation, but it does have limits on, of course, the types of uses. So you can have medical offices, and sometimes medical offices do go into the evenings, minute clinics, things like that. It allows for daycare centers, right? GO.
Can't have a
You can't have a nail
store.
right? In the nail, or is it a
It's an office. Oh, I see. Office, yeah, I'm sorry.
Maybe 1 or 2 chairs, I think.
Yeah, not a huge one, but in general, GO is used for, professional offices, and typically those are not late night type things. They might be open till like 7 or 8 in the evening, but there is not limitations in there. It's not like the difference in the more pure commercial districts where LB is like typically 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. and GO is 24. GB is 24 hours a day.
Yeah. And it's a business that could be a convenience store.
So, just as another, sorry, so the person who's wanting this is, I think you said it was a general contractor who wanted this. So essentially, if he had this type of zoning, it basically allow him to park his vehicles.
You can have regular passenger type vehicles. If a contractor had his office, he could have an office, but he couldn't have like dump trucks, couldn't have excavation equipment, anything like that.
The other point I'd like to make is, if it does go to general office, it's outside the purview of any kind of design review. So there is no consideration for a fencing buffer or landscape buffer or light security lighting or anything for those residences.
Yes.
As opposed to a business like I live behind G's Hawk Rail, and because they're on a commercial.
Is that where they
design review, design review would regulate that for me as a resident. But this property has no regulation for that. So it went to something like a business office.
It would have to have buffers. Now, if they want to get a business license for GO type uses, there is going to be a certain buffer. I don't know
Mr.
what
Morgan,
it is.
considerations RO.
Yeah, RO is a possibility. It's pretty much the same type of uses. I think what was the difference?
But isn't that limited in hours?
Led them to go to GO versus RO.
RO's limitation of hours, I'm sure.
They had mentioned part of the reason that they prefer the GO versus the RO is the potential for daycare or a school type facility in the property, and so. But they would have to, if they intensify the use to get a business license, you would have to have some buffering. I don't know exactly what it is.
And a daycare there and daycare accessing through that neighborhood to pick up would be difficult.
So Ms. Harrison made a motion. There wasn't a second, but is there a second to that motion?
I'm just thankful for Donna. Thank you.
Yep. So,
Always thankful.
so that motion that go on. Is there another motion?
I'll move for disapproval.
So I think they'd like some approval of some zoning.
They're asking for a zoning.
Zoning,
So we gotta give it something.
Even if you give us something that maybe isn't comfortable, it's RO or whatever, it gives, at least it gets it in the city, because otherwise they gotta zone it when it comes in, and
that's the softest commercial thing that we can do. But even to put a daycare there, I mean, we just fought the whole situation.
So we need to zone the property. We need to give it, we need to, Mr. Morgan.
And the RO would not allow the daycare aspect. It still would allow most of the offices and things like that. But it would not
So,
allow-
it's at the side of the
okay, is that a motion? Do you want to recommend that we zone that RO?
Yes, I will.
You know what, now he can come back, obviously, we can talk about it, but, I think we need to zone the property, correct? Yeah,
I'll second that.
great. Ms. Jacobs recommends RO, so,
all right, so she made a motion to approve RO.
right,
Jimmy Bailey second.
seconded by Mr. Bailey. Any other questions, comments? All in favor of the motion to zone the property, number 6, RO, signify by saying aye. Anyone opposed? That's 8 in favor, none opposed. That's great, thank you all. How about minutes? Ms. Jacobs, I'm always picking on you for minutes, because you dissect them pretty well. I read them all.
First of all, we need to thank Cook for this.
Well, he's doing a good job. Thank you, sir.
This is now a novel. This is now a novel. This is a novel.
But you read them, so that's the good part. You read them all.
This is an hour.
So Ms. Jacobs, wasn't there a correction to the minute?
For approval.
Okay, you gonna move forward?
No correction.
As is? I thought you had some corrections. They changed, they
No,
modified.
the corrections are to August that I'm waiting on.
Okay.
Where
All right.
Erica was said, I voted against
Second.
something. Maybe she-
Motion, Ms. Jacobs, I don't even think you should have a motion. It should just be unanimous. But no. Motion by Mr. Jacobs to approve the minutes, second by Mr. Bailey. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? I'd say in favor, not opposed. Any staff updates? So one thing, Ms. Jacobs and I have talked a little bit, and I think I'm asking Ms. Jacobs to be, let's talk about it next month. She wanted to do it more, to talk about some time management of these meetings and things. But if we can do that next month, is that okay with you?
Well, the problem with next month is our meeting is now been moved to December 15th.
Yes, and I wanted to alert everybody to that.
But I don't know how much steps we'll have to see at the agenda
I
is.
may not be here on this. This is moved.
I know okay. Well, let's talk about that, because that'd be good to know whether we have a quorum, whether we have to adjust that time.
So yeah, because of your normal meeting date for December would have been December 21st, Wednesday, December 21st. It was so close into the holidays that we said, well, maybe we could back it up. And so in the schedule we made for the entire year, it was shown as December 15th, Thursday, December 15th, 5
It
p.m.
sounds like, how many people can't be here on the 15th?
I can be here, but I have to leave at 6:30.
So, Mr. Bailey, I think you said you were gone. Mr. Jacobs said she's gone.
If we can have good time management, I'll be happy.
We need to talk about that, but yeah,
Well, the applications would have already come in for December 15th.
we look like.
Well, they haven't yet, but the deadline will be
Does it
Monday.
look like it's gonna be a big agenda?
I mean, we haven't seen
So, Ms. Jacobs.
so far, but sometimes things surprise us.
You know, we could go back to Frank's 2-minute timer.
We can, but I
Huge
tell you
fan of
that, my concern is, and again, I've debated, and I think we ought to discuss it another time, but I think my concern is people have always historically, Ms. Lempis has had to leave, and that's one of the reasons I want to talk about it later. Historically, this organization has always allowed people to speak and be heard. And unless there's a big, that's why I asked how many people wanted to speak, and I was going to try to limit them if there was many more. I always ask Ms. Sling, what do you think? Should I cut them off? This has been historically a group where the people have been heard. Sometimes we're here 15 minutes more, sometimes we're an hour more, sometimes 2 hours more. The latest I've been here is 10 to 12. Me and Mr. Waring went to House of Pancakes to eat breakfast or dinner. But it's always been a place where people have said, you heard me. I didn't agree. You didn't agree with me, but you heard me. And so I think we should talk about that. But I think what I try to do is say how many people want to speak and say, hey, try to let them know we need to limit them.
So I hear you, but I do think, having done this for 15 years now, it has gotten, I mean, you've been here much longer, but we had times where people were brief, and now people are very, very, lengthy. And redundant and repetitive.
I don't think.
And what's very hard for me is when everybody speaks at one meeting, we defer, and then they all come back and say the same thing again, which we've had happen through the years. And I do think it's just worth maybe a little 15-minute discussion on how best to manage that. I do agree we should hear everyone, but I also think that there are times where it probably hurts the process.
And maybe we need to see, maybe we should poll to see how, like I said, how many speak. If it's over a certain amount, then we talk about time limits or something.
Well, okay.
Again,
First of all, our policy already tells us what to do. We're not following.
But historically, we hadn't done that.
I know, it doesn't matter. It's in our code, and we don't follow it. That's one thing. Two is, when we mix the rules up all the time, then people come and they talk. And I think when you know you're only gonna get 2 minutes, you consolidate your thing and you don't stop and nobody's cutting you off so you can repeat and repeat and repeat. That's one thing. Two is, there are a lot of people here, like those people that sat here for their very last zoning to be heard. They should be respected too for their time that's sat here. And the 40 people that wrote in on both of those things, we made no mention in this meeting of those 40 letters that somebody spent the time to write a letter to this commission. We don't even summarize them and say, we just say they're opposed.
But
we don't
some of the 40 were here. And I feel like if you've written your letter, maybe don't get up and speak.
Exactly. So there is, and I have been coming to these meetings a lot longer than I've been serving on them, and DRB has gone to a time management situation because it got out of hand. City council now is more on a time management because it's got out of hand. I think that we just need, I'm not saying we shouldn't let people speak, but even if it's 3 minutes, 3 minutes is a long time. 2 minutes is a long time.
Well, I'd like
It's when it's a
everybody.
minute, when it's a minute, it's too short.
Yeah, it's late now, so I'd like, and I agree with you all, but I'd like everybody to think about this but let's talk about first what I'd like to know so we can sort of, when are we gonna have that December meeting? Who's not gonna be here? Because I want Ms. Jacobs to be here to discuss this. You're not gonna be on the 15th. So maybe it's January. We have time and we talk about this and decide. Mr. Singh, you got some thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I think we need to decide about the 15th is,
That's the first question.
I think everybody's here, but.
Well,
two of y'all can't be here.
you'll be here till what time? 6:30? So it depends on the agenda. But you folks will be here.
Yes.
Right.
And,
I mean, you really can't.
so we'll have a quorum. You'll be here, Ms.
Yeah,
Haskell.
I mean, yeah, but if we're, yes, I'll be here for the meet, yes.
So let's do that, but we'll hold off on this because Ms. Jacobs has some valid concerns. We'll talk about, maybe we do that in January. We talk about the time issue at the end of a meeting, we allocate some time.
I think maybe because it seems like, because if we allocate it towards the end of the meeting, I think we're already, but just hear me, I mean, I don't think there's any opposition to us possibly having like 1 hour of like a Zoom meeting where, I mean, I know City Council has Zoom meetings still, where we can just do that and have a just a meeting
So
like
it has to be public. If we have a meeting, the public has to be included in the Zoom as well. So that's.
I mean, they can be, I mean, I'm not opposed to them being a part of it. I mean, they probably won't even really comment on time limits, but I mean.
Or they may.
Or we come in January a half hour before. 20 minutes.
Or we could make it one of your agenda items for
Let's do that.
January. If you
Let's do
prefer.
that. Let's put
We
it
have
on.
a discussion of rules of procedure in reference to comment period time before the
Yes,
commission.
let's put it on the agenda and then we can say it's on there. We have to talk about it. We have to discuss it. We have to
And
decide
the
on
other
it.
thing I just want to bring up is that I specifically at the last union peer gathering twisted Jacob Lindsay's arm as hard as I could because I know they want a joint workshop with us, the union peer group and us, prior to their submission of everything to the TRC, which they're shooting for January. And I said to them, I said, please, for the respect of the 8 people on this commission that are not retired and are very busy, give us a date that gives us time to get on a calendar. And I don't know if.
Yeah, I did talk to him today, and they would like to do that. I did talk to him about potential dates, last 2 or 3 days of November, first of December timeframes, but they have to check and see. Talked about having it actually on Union Pier at the port. I'm sorry,
They have to see what's available.
the port, the passenger terminal. Thank you. And we were talking about doing it maybe in the afternoon, so it would be daylight and people could see that, like maybe at 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon. So as soon as I have a date, and he told me he would have it tomorrow, he would have a couple of dates that could work. I will send those. We'll send those around to you all and get your thoughts. If they don't work, then we'll just punt and move on.
I meet lunch next week, early next week, so maybe I can push that again.
Okay.
Make sure he gets his.
It's only fair to y'all. Y'all schedules are busy. I'm tired.
Is there any issue with doing it maybe over midday, lunch hour-ish?
If y'all are more into that, that's fine
I think
too.
the question is, he wants to get that terminal so we can.
Which is
meet
fine,
there.
but you said 3:34. and
Yeah,
just-
I
just
mean, if
personally-
the middle of the day is better for you all, I think that's fine too. We do have to allow the public to come to that, but this is a special meeting, so it could be during the
Well, as
middle
long
of
as,
the day, that's
I think
fine.
Mr. Jacobs said, as long as we get a couple of weeks lead time, so we can all schedule.
But if we're talking end of November, that's what we need to know.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Are you, is middle of the day better for, am I getting more
If I can
concurrence on that?
notice, I can pencil.
I can make it
work.
Okay, middle of the day?
It's just
Okay.
only fair.
Mr. Bailey, you all right on
process
that?
that we just don't have 3.
Is that, I mean, is this will obviously have to be a publicly advertised meeting and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
It's not a public hearing.
There will be no public hearing.
Right, it's just a workshop. So that they can present their ideas to you
Right.
all, you get your
The
feedback.
public hearing will be when
They come
actually
before you
come to
formally.
us.
This is just an extra opportunity before they finalize their submittal to hear from you all.
Thank you.
I just want as many of us there, because to check a box that said, oh, we had a meeting with 3 commissioners were available for something that is as large as Union here, just didn't seem right.
Right. Mr. Morgan, do you have anything else you want to update us on?
Just real quick, the 2 other big projects. So we are still in discussions about potential consultant for the Peninsula Plan. There also is an idea about a way to maybe get some more money in this year's budget for that. If that were to be the case, it might delay the decision on the consultants a little bit, and it might push us into the spring before we could start on that, but it would get us more money, which might broaden our ability to draw other interested consultants. Then on the zoning ordinance, we have a consultant group that our selection committee did select. We are in negotiations with them. There's a little bit of a budget thing on that one too, because we already have $500,000 allocated for that, and we have in our budget that has been endorsed by our budget office another $500,000. So that would help us fund that, but we're trying to figure out how firm that is. But that is part of the negotiations with the consultants. A really fantastic group of consultants that would work on that. So we're very excited about that. So that's what's going on.
Thank you. I hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
It's hard to believe it's Thanksgiving. I can't believe it.
Here's one of mine.